Chapter 1071 Martial Artist Mountain Range. Fatso paced back and forth in the cave abode, restless like an ant on a hot pan. Swish! Suddenly, Qin Feiyong appeared out of thin air. "Boss, you're here." Fatso immediately went up to him. "Did Chu Xian's parents give you some problems?" Looking at Fatso's anxious look, Qin Feiyong couldn't help but frown slightly. "No. This time, Fat Lord called you here because of Li Yan, not because of Chu Xian." Fatso shook his head and said, "Li Yan." Qin Feiyong was stunned. During this period of time, Fat Lord has been busy dealing with Chu Xian's parents and hasn't paid attention to what's going on outside. Just yesterday, I suddenly heard someone say that since Li He died, Li Yan has been sitting on the sword edge all day long depressed. Fatso said. Qin Feiyong frowned and said, "Grandpa is dead and granddaughter is sad. This is human nature. Why did you call me here? Besides, I don't have much contact with her." "Boss, you can't say that. You even helped Li He. What's wrong with talking her out of it?" Fatso pursed his lips. "Aren't you just looking for trouble for me? Li Yan is not a child. Do you need me to talk to her? Let her calm down for a while and she will get over it. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him and took out a portal. "Wait, boss." Fatso hurriedly grabbed Qin Feiyong. "You're not done, are you?" Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Fatso smiled awkwardly and quickly let go, saying, "Okay, let's not talk about this. But there's another thing that you have to help her with." "What else?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Li He was the pillar of the Li family. Now that Li He is dead, the Li family will decline. As you know, Li Yan is quite beautiful and has many admirers pursuing her. But in the past, because of Li He, they didn't dare to act recklessly. But now, with Li He's death, some people have started to have ulterior motives. There were even people who directly threatened her, saying that if she didn't comply, they would deal with her Li family. Fatso said, "Although the Li family has declined, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Who dares to threaten her like this?" Qin Feiyong frowned. "A lot. Most of them are from wealthy families, and one of them is the most arrogant. His name is Nye Xiaoyong, a disciple of the Saint Peak. He has another identity, the son of the Vajra tribe's chief." Fatso said with a hint of disgust in his eyes. "Adamantine tribe?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. "Don't look down on the Adamantine tribe because the Adamantine tribe is also one of the 9 super tribes. Moreover, their overall strength is ranked in the upper middle of the 9 super tribes." Fatso said, "I see." Qin Feiyong nodded in realization and said with a smile, "This is a good thing." "What the hell?" Fatso was stunned. As the son of a super tribe's chief, whether it is identity or status, Li Yan can't compare to him. If Li Yan can marry him, the Li family can be considered to have a meteoric rise. If this isn't a good thing, then what is? Qin Feiyong said with a smile, "Boss, how can you be like this? Where did your righteous heart go? Are you still the boss that I know? Could it be that someone else is impersonating you?" Fatso looked at Qin Feiyong in surprise. Scram! Qin Feiyong's face darkened and knocked Fatso's head hard, causing Fatso to grimace in pain. He endured the pain and said with a flattering smile, "Boss, please help her." Qin Feiyong looked at him with a strange expression and said, "Why do you care so much about her? Don't tell me that you like her." "Damn, is Fat Lord the kind of person who loves every woman he sees?" Fatso glared at him. Qin Feiyong looked at him and shook his head. "No, but there must be a reason." He knew Fatso's character too well. He would never beg him for a woman he had only seen a few times. Heard. Fatso's face was cloudy and uncertain. There really are other factors. Qin Feiyong raised the corner of his mouth and said lightly, "If you don't want to say, then I'll go back. You can go by yourself." "Don't." I'll say it. It's like this. Yesterday evening, I went to the Sword Peak to persuade her. After all, When Yenwei and I were in the transaction pavilion, she took care of us a lot. When I arrived at the Sword Peak, I happened to see Nye Xiaoyong threatening her. I couldn't stand it, so I went to reason with him. In the end, Fatso couldn't continue. His face was full of embarrassment. In the end, Qin Feiyong was curious. That the fatty stammered. When he saw Qin Feiyong take out another teleportation gate, he hurriedly said. In the end, he didn't say anything and slapped me a few times. He even threatened to cripple me if I meddled in his business again. Qin Feiyong was stunned. Looking at Fatso's chubby face, he teased, "It's good to give you a few slaps. It'll help you lose weight." "Boss, you're my brother. Your brother was beaten, and you still say such things. You're too much." Fatso grumbled discontentedly. "You deserve it. Is the disciple of the Saint Peak someone you can provoke? What's more, he's a direct descendant of a super tribe." Qin Feiyong said expressionlessly. But this was not the point. What angered him the most was that this damn Fatso actually tricked him. He said that he was helping Lien, but in fact he was helping himself. "Boss, I was wrong. I shouldn't have tricked you. Please help me. If I don't vent my anger, I really can't feel at ease." Fatso looked at him pitifully. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at him and sneered, "You have to look at the owner before beating a dog. He clearly knows that you're my person. Yet he still dares to touch you. He's looking down on me too much. Don't worry. I'll definitely help you get back your face." "Thank you, boss." Fatso was overjoyed. As long as the boss took action, the disciples of the Saint Peak and the direct descendant of a super tribe were all small fry. No. Suddenly, he looked at Qin Feiyong angrily and said, "Boss, what do you mean? You have to look at the owner before you hit a dog? Is Fat Lord's position in your heart only like this?" Qin Feiyong's face stiffened. In all honesty, he had never thought of it that way. It was purely a habit. He looked at Fatso and pretended to be stupid. "Did I say that?" "Nonsense. Lord Fatty's ears aren't deaf." Fatso roared. Okay, it's just a slip of the tongue. Don't take it to heart. I'll apologize to you, okay?" Qin Feiyong smiled embarrassedly. Knowing that he was pretending to be stupid, couldn't he give him a way out? If an apology is useful, what's the use of justice? Fatty didn't want to let go of the fact that he was in the right. Then what do you want? Qin Feiyong was helpless. It was really as the saying goes, trouble comes from the mouth. Fatso thought for a moment and laughed. "Fat Lord can forgive you, but you have to promise me that you will cripple that Nye Xiaoyong." "All right, isn't he just a playboy? If I cripple him, what can the Vudra tribe do to me?" Qin Feiyong nodded without hesitation. Fatso was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth and urged, "Then let's go. I just received news that he went to harass Lien again." "Lead the way." Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with killing intent. Daring to bully Qin Feiyong's brother. Even if it was the emperor, he wouldn't let him go. "Buzz." Fatso waved his hand and opened a teleportation door. The two of them rushed in one after another. At the same time, Sword Edge. This giant peak was located next to a river a few miles away from the Warrior Mountain Range. It was more than 1,000 feet high, straight and steep. From afar, it looked like a giant sealed sword. This was the origin of the word Sword Edge. At this moment, at the peak of the Sword Edge, "Lien, you are no longer the same as before. Your grandfather is dead. You are no longer the little princess from before. Let me give you a piece of advice. You should obey our senior brother Nye as soon as possible." "That's right. Although our senior brother Nye comes here every day to look for you, he has never forced you to do anything. You should understand senior brother Nye's feelings for you. Yes, don't be stubborn. With senior brother Nye's identity and strength, as long as he says a word, who knows how many women will rush to offer themselves to him. Don't be ignorant of your good fortune." More than a dozen young men stood together and talked nonstop. In front of these people, there was a young man in purple. He was about 1, 8 meters tall and had long purple hair. His facial features were handsome, and his eyebrows were as sharp as knives. His dark eyes revealed a shocking sharpness. There was no suspense. This person was Nie Xiaoyong. He looked coldly at the cliff in front of him, his proud eyebrows full of impatience. He saw a young woman sitting at the edge of the cliff. Her long black hair was like a waterfall, and her pure, white dress fluttered in the wind. Her exquisite facial features and tender skin were like a masterpiece of the heavens, perfect and flawless. However, her black, gem-like eyes, appeared empty and lifeless. She stared at the void in front of her, no matter what the group of people behind her said. She didn't seem to hear them, and there was a sadness that couldn't be dispersed between her eyebrows. "Lian, are you listening to us or not? I'm telling you, don't be ungrateful. As a person, his patience will be worn out by you." The group of people shouted with righteous indignation. Lian still turned a deaf ear, and her eyes were dim. Nie Xiaoyong looked at Lian, and the annoyance on his face became more and more obvious. Suddenly, a touch of hostility flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand and grabbed in the air. His saint power roared and forcibly pulled Lian in front of him. Then, Nie Xiaoyong grabbed Lian's hair and pulled it down hard. Lian's pale face suddenly looked up at him. Nie Xiaoyong greedily glanced at Lian's chest, then looked into Lian's eyes and said sternly, "I'm telling you, don't challenge my patience again." However, Lian neither struggled nor said anything. She just looked at him in disgust. The anger in Nie Xiaoyong's heart became more and more uncontrollable. "The more you act like this, the more I like it. Today, I must have you and no one can stop me." He smiled coldly and threw Lian on the ground. He turned to the dozen young men and shouted, "Take her, let's go!" Okay, the 2 young men ran over, picked up the embarrassed Lian, and prepared to leave. "Where do you want to take her?" Chapter 1072. Who is it? How dare you peep at us from the dark? Come out and die. The group of people immediately turned their heads to look at the forest, their faces full of hostility. Isn't it just watching? Is there a need to be so vicious? With a mocking laugh, Qin Feiyang and Fatso walked out of the forest. They had arrived long ago. They just didn't show up and wanted to see what these people were going to do. The result was far beyond their expectations. This Nie Xiaoyong actually planned to force himself on her, to be able to do such a dirty thing. He was really worthy of being a famous playboy. Ancestor Mu. At the same time, seeing that it was Qin Feiyang, Nie Xiaoyong and the others' pupils shrank. Their fear could not be concealed. But Lian was still the same as before. There was no color in her eyes. What a pitiful girl. Qin Feiyang secretly sighed. He couldn't help but want to tell Lian the truth. But in the end, reason prevailed over impulse. Fatso stepped forward, stared at Nie Xiaoyong arrogantly and shouted, "I didn't expect you to be such a scum. Let her go immediately for fat lord." With Qin Feiyang here, he was full of confidence. Nie Xiaoyong frowned and said in a deep voice, "Let her go." The 2 young men who were holding Lian immediately let go of Lian and then hid behind Nie Xiaoyong, looking at Qin Feiyang warily. Fatso was proud and said contemptuously, "You let her go just because I asked you to. Is this still the arrogant young Master Nie from yesterday?" Nie Xiaoyong's eyes were cold as he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Junior brother Mu, we have always minded our own business. Why are you meddling in other people's business today?" "Why?" Qin Feiyang glanced at Nie Xiaoyong, then at the others and laughed. "Don't you know that Fatso is my brother?" Just now, he had clearly seen everyone's cultivation base with a single glance. Nie Xiaoyong was a 3-star battle saint, and the others were 1-star and 2-star battle saints. Obviously, they were all disciples of the Holy Land. If it was placed in front of him, he might have stayed away. But now he could deal with these small fries with one hand. Brother, Nie Xiaoyong and the others turned pale with fright. They weren't the only ones who knew about the relationship between Fatso and Qin Feiyong. Everyone in God's city knew about it. Everyone thought that they were just friends, but they didn't expect them to be brothers. The difference between a friend and a brother was not just a little bit. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, Fatso, how many slaps did he give you yesterday? 20. Fatso said. Nie Xiaoyong's face darkened, and he said angrily, Bullshit! I clearly only slapped you 5 times. Where did the 20 come from? Does the interest not count? Fatso snickered. Interest? Nie Xiaoyong was about to explode. In just one night, it had increased by 15%. Wasn't this interest too high? Okay, slap him the same way he slapped you yesterday, Qin Feiyong said, and pointed to the dozen people next to Nie Xiaoyong, and said lightly, and each of them will be slapped 20 times. What? The dozen people's faces turned green on the spot. A young man in green shouted, Junior Brother Mu, most of us weren't here yesterday. Why are you slapping us too? 40. Qin Feiyong said expressionlessly. The young man in green was furious and wanted to speak again. The others quickly stopped him and shouted, If you speak again, it won't be 40, it will be 80 or even 160. So can you shut up? The young man in green felt wronged. He was fighting for the injustice for everyone, but in the end he was blamed by everyone. Did they have a conscience? Fatso walked toward Nie Xiaoyong with a smirk on his face and said, Young Master Nie, I really hope you can show your arrogance yesterday and show my boss. But unfortunately, you don't have the guts. Humiliation. What a blatant humiliation. Nie Xiaoyong clenched his hands and looked at Qin Feiyong, saying, You'd better think it through. Slap. Qin Feiyong said. Fatso immediately raised his arm and slapped Nie Xiaoyong's face. A bright red palm print immediately appeared. Nie Xiaoyong was stunned. He actually slapped him. He shouted in exasperation, Ancestor Mu, my big brother is one of the 3 kings of the Saint Peak. If you dare to touch me, even if you are the direct disciple of the chief tower master, you won't have a good ending. One of the 3 kings of the Saint Peak? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Seeing this, the other dozen people thought that Qin Feiyong was a little timid and became arrogant. That's right. Senior brother Nie's big brother is called Nie Zhan. Senior brother Nie Zhan's talent is extraordinary and can be said to be a rare talent in 10,000 years. And he is deeply loved by the Peak Master of the Saint Peak, and the Peak Master has the intention to take him as a disciple. His future is limitless, and senior brother Nie Zhan usually loves senior brother Nie the most, so you'd better restrain yourself. The dozen people clamored. Take him as a disciple? Qin Feiyong raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, So what? Your Peak Master of the Saint Peak is my future father-in-law? Wang Yu's father was the Peak Master of the Saint Peak. Everyone was stunned. That's right. This person was already engaged to Wang Yu, and was considered a family with the Peak Master of the Saint Peak. Even if they made a big fuss, the Peak Master of the Saint Peak would definitely help his own family. What's more, this matter was originally their fault. Senior Brother Mu, we were wrong. Please let us go this time. Yes, we have no grudges in the past, and we have no grudges today, so there's no need to make a fuss like this. The dozen people were scared and hurriedly flattered him. Seeing that the dozen people began to curry favor, Nie Xiaoyong's face turned livid, continued to slap them. Qin Feiyong ignored those people. They were all clowns and were not pleasing to his eyes. Fatso chuckled and raised his hand to slap them again. Hey, isn't that Ancestor Mu? Nie Xiaoyong is here too. What are they doing? A few disciples passed by in the air, and when they noticed Qin Feiyong and the others, they immediately stopped and looked down at them. Slap. It was also at this moment. Fatso slapped Nie Xiaoyong's face again, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. What? He actually slapped Nie Xiaoyong. The disciples in the air were stunned. One of them was refreshed and hurriedly said, "Hurry up and inform everyone that Ancestor Mu and Nie Xiaoyong are fighting. There's a good show to watch." They all used the image crystal to send messages to their friends. No way. When did Ancestor Mu become so high profile that he actually let someone slap Nie Xiaoyong in public? The news spread from 1 to 10, from 10 to 100, and very quickly it spread throughout the main pagoda. Those who received the news were all shocked without exception. Continue to be arrogant. Fatso was overjoyed now. The humiliation he suffered yesterday was finally washed away. However, facing this scene, Lian did not react at all. She turned around and walked to the edge of the cliff, continuing to be in a daze. Qin Feiyong looked at her back and couldn't help but frown. Enough! Suddenly, a shout rang out. Nie Xiaoyong grabbed Fatso's wrist and said in a deep voice, "I advise you to stop before you go too far." Fatso turned to look at Qin Feiyong and said, "Boss, he's threatening me again." Qin Feiyong looked at Nie Xiaoyong. Nie Xiaoyong also looked at Qin Feiyong, a trace of killing intent lurking in his eyes, and said, "If you have the ability, let's fight one-on-one, regardless of life and death." Qin Feiyong looked at him in surprise and suddenly laughed. This smile made Nie Xiaoyong's scalp go numb, and he began to regret saying that. Regardless of life and death? In other words, this is a duel of life and death? The few people in the sky looked at each other. It seemed that this matter had gotten out of hand. Fatso also looked at Nie Xiaoyong in shock and asked, "You really want to have a duel of life and death with boss?" Nie Xiaoyong's eyes darkened as he nodded and sneered, "Yes, but this young master is afraid that he doesn't dare." Fatso also laughed. Challenging Qin Feiyong? This was really borrowing courage from the heavens. However, even if he wanted to challenge, these 20 slaps couldn't be let go just like that. He suddenly raised his other arm and slapped towards Nie Xiaoyong's face again. "You're courting death." The killing intent in Nie Xiaoyong's eyes was no longer concealed. "You're the one who's courting death." At the same time, Qin Feiyong also moved. Like a ghost, he landed in front of Nie Xiaoyong. His palm was like a blade as battle qi gushed out and directly entered Nie Xiaoyong's lower abdomen. Nie Xiaoyong immediately knelt on the ground and screamed in pain. Qin Feiyong retracted his palm and shook off the blood on his hand. He turned to look at Fatso and said indifferently, "As you wish, you're crippled. Now you can do whatever you want. Boss is still the best." Fatso smiled flatteringly and stepped forward to punch and kick Nie Xiaoyong. "Ancestor Mu, you despicable person. You actually sneak attacked me when I wasn't paying attention, with his Qi crippled. Even if Nie Xiaoyong was a 3-star battle saint, he had no power to resist. He could only let Fatso destroy him as he howled in pain. Despicable person? You knew that I was here to cause trouble for you, yet you didn't take any precautions. Aren't you stupid? Also, fighting one-on-one with a hedonistic scum like you is purely a waste of time." Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. He walked to Lian's side and looked at her pale face. His lips moved, but in the end he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth and lowered his head to look at the river below. For a moment, only Fatso's arrogant voice and Nie Xiaoyong's screams could be heard. Swish! Soon, figures continued to appear in the sky. They were all disciples of the main pagoda. Even some disciples of the Holy Lands came after hearing the news. He actually crippled Nie Xiaoyong's Qi. Isn't that too cruel? Yes, our main pagoda has a rule that disciples are not allowed to fight in private. Even if he is the direct disciple of the main pagoda lord, he can't violate it. Someone said with dissatisfaction, "I don't agree with this. If Nie Xiaoyong never harassed Lian, would this have happened?" Speaking of which, he only has himself to blame for this. That's right. Senior Brother Mu is punishing evil and upholding justice. We should support him. There were also people who supported Qin Feiyang. Aya, it's so lively. At this moment, accompanied by a strange laughter, a purple-clothed youth broke through the sky and landed beside Qin Feiyang. This voice. Chapter 1073. The purple-clothed youth snickered. I was worried that you would be alone in the main pagoda, isolated and helpless. That's why I came back to help you. Then shouldn't I thank you? Qin Feiyang sneered. The purple-clothed youth said, If you really want to thank me, I will accept it. Qin Feiyang coldly glanced at the purple-clothed youth, then continued to look at the river below, his eyes flickering. Awesome. At this time, Fatso finally stopped, looking at Nie Xiaoyong, who was like a dead dog. His fat face was full of pleasure. Then, he looked at the other dozen people and shouted, Line up for me, one by one. The group of people's faces were ashen. They were all disciples of the sacred land. Usually, in front of ordinary disciples, they were high and mighty monarchs, and no one dared to disobey them. But now they had actually fallen to this point, being bullied by an ordinary disciple in public. How could they raise their heads in the main pagoda in the future? But they didn't dare to resist, because there was a fierce person watching from the side. They glanced at Qin Feiyang, and with a heart full of humiliation, they obediently lined up and went up one by one to be slapped in the face. Pah! Not long after, more than a dozen people's faces were swollen like pig heads. The people in the sky looked at each other in dismay. As the saying goes, don't hit people in the face. But this damn fatso, he didn't hit anywhere but the face. Wasn't this deliberately embarrassing the disciples of the sacred land? If you let me know in the future that you came to harass Li Yan, then it won't be as simple as today. Scram! Qin Feiyang said without turning his head. Yes. The group of people nodded repeatedly, terrified, and then took Nie Xiaoyong and left in a sorry state. The direct disciple of the chief pagoda master is indeed different. Isn't that so? If it were someone else causing trouble here, those law enforcement elders and deacon elders would have come long ago. Regardless of whether you are reasonable or not, they would beat you up first. But now look which law enforcement elder is here. They are all playing dumb, not wanting to offend this person. The crowd in the sky whispered secretly. Fatso looked up at those people and shouted, Do you all have nothing to do? Hearing this domineering shout, some people immediately raised their eyebrows. They were either members of famous clans, super tribes, or disciples of the Holy Lands. Who would dare to scold them like this? But when they saw Qin Feiyang standing at the edge of the cliff, they chose to swallow their anger and left. Very soon, only Qin Feiyang, Li Yan, Fatso, and the purple-clothed youth were left in this place. Alas! After a long time, Qin Feiyang sighed softly. He turned to Li Yan and said, I understand your current feelings, but what's the point of doing this? I'm sure your grandfather wouldn't want to see you like this. Then what should I do? Laughing heartlessly, I can't do it. Li Yan murmured. Qin Feiyang said, You need to have the courage to face it. If you can't even bear this blow, how can you face more brutal blows in the future? After all, life is unpredictable and anything can happen. Li Yan was silent. Qin Feiyang looked at her for a while and simply ignored it, because this kind of thing, outsiders couldn't interfere. Li Yan could only rely on herself to walk out of it. Qin Feiyang glanced at the purple-clothed youth and looked at Fatso. Let's go! Buzz. At this moment, a buzzing sound rang out. Boss, your message? Fatso was stunned and asked. Qin Feiyang shook his head and looked at the purple-clothed youth. The purple-clothed youth also shook his head. The image crystal of the three of them didn't respond, so it must be Li Yan's image crystal. The three of them couldn't help but look at Li Yan. Lien was silent for a while and took out the image crystal. Buzz! The image of a middle-aged man emerged. This person's face was rough, his eyebrows reached his temples, and he was quite dignified. But at this moment, the middle-aged man looked at Lien, his eyes full of helplessness and even a trace of sadness. Lien looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Father, what's wrong?" The middle-aged man asked, "Is there anyone else beside you?" Lien glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and shook her head at the middle-aged man. "There's something I have to tell you in advance," the middle-aged man said, but it seemed to be something difficult for him to say. Lien said, "Father, what's the matter?" Sigh. The middle-aged man sighed deeply and said, we have already agreed to let you marry Fu Anshan." What? Lien suddenly stood up. Qin Feiyang and the other two also had a look of disbelief. Marry Fu Anshan? Was this a joke? In terms of seniority, Fu Anshan was of the grandfather's generation. What were Lian's parents thinking? The middle-aged man blamed himself. I'm sorry. Father didn't want to do this, but father had no choice. Looks like there's a secret. Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other and quietly looked at the middle-aged man. Lien finally recovered, looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Did Fu Anshan force you?" "Yes." The middle-aged man nodded and said, "Some time ago, Fu Anshan suddenly came to our house and said that he wanted to marry you. Your mother and I were furious at that time. Who does he think he is? Why should he marry you?" But at this point, the middle-aged man fell silent, his face filled with pain. "Father, don't say any more. I know. He must have threatened you and your mother. There's nothing we can do about it. Without grandfather, our family has already declined." Lien shook her head and smiled, but her face was as pale as paper. "I'm sorry, it's my father's incompetence. Originally, your mother and I didn't agree to it, even if we were beaten to death, but the elders in our clan chose to give up on you for the future of the Li family. They even threatened that if your mother and I continued to protect you, not only would they join forces to abolish me as the patriarch, but they would also expel us from the family. This family was single-handedly built by your grandfather. Father can't just give it to them for free. Can you forgive your father?" The middle-aged man said. Lien laughed. "Your daughter can understand, father. You don't have to blame yourself anymore." "Thank you," the middle-aged man said gratefully. "Then when will you come back? Your mother and I both hope to have a good time with you before you get married." Lien pondered for a moment and said, "After a while, your daughter doesn't want to see that group of mercenary elders right now." "All right." The middle-aged man did not force her, and the shadow quickly dissipated. Lien put away the image crystal and turned to look at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and said self-deprecatingly, "I didn't expect that after grandfather died, my Li family would become so unbearable to actually let me marry an old man. If you want to laugh, laugh." Qin Feiyang and Fatso looked at each other with bitter smiles on their faces. Right now, they only had sympathy in their hearts. How could they laugh at Lien? "Then marry me. As long as you marry me, on this forgotten continent, no one will dare to do anything to your Li family." The purple-clothed youth chuckled. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Are you kidding me at a time like this?" "I'm not kidding. I like anything that you've taken a fancy to," the purple-clothed youth said playfully. "Everything I like." Qin Feiyang was stunned and said with a dark face, "Don't talk nonsense. I have nothing to do with Lien. If you have nothing to do with her, why are you so concerned about her? You even offended Nya, Xiaoyong for her. The leader of the Adamantine tribe is famous for his fiery temper. He's not someone to be trifled with." The purple-clothed youth laughed secretly. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, "Is it a friendship between fellow disciples?" "TCH, stop pretending." The purple-clothed youth raised his middle finger. Lien said, "You guys go. I want to calm down by myself." "Then you take care." Qin Feiyong looked at her deeply, then turned and left with Fatso. The purple-clothed youth's eyes flashed, and he quickly chased after the two. After leaving the Sword Peak, Qin Feiyong stopped and turned to look at Fatso and said, "I'm worried that Li Yan might take things too hard and do something stupid. You must keep an eye on her before the succession ceremony." Fatso hurriedly said, "Fat Lord hasn't even dealt with Chu Xian's parents. How can he have time to take care of her?" Qin Feiyong said helplessly, "Let's put Chu Xian's matter aside for now. If Li Yan really does something stupid, Li He will kill me." "Li He?" The purple-clothed youth was stunned and said suspiciously, "Isn't Li He dead?" Qin Feiyong ignored him and looked at Fatso. "Don't worry, after I rest for a few days, I will personally go to the Chu family and ask Chu Xian's parents." "Okay then." Fatso nodded. Qin Feiyong didn't stay any longer. He opened a teleportation door and walked in with large strides. Seeing this, the purple-clothed youth hurriedly followed. Calm Heart Lake, on the balcony of the attic. Qin Feiyong stared at the purple-clothed youth angrily and said, "Why are you following me? Do you know where this is? If someone sees you, you will be in trouble." The purple-clothed youth glanced at the island and said with a smile, "Of course I know this place, Calm Heart Lake." "What do you want to do?" Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. The purple-clothed youth said, "I just want to know, when you were in the Azure Sea, how did your cultivation suddenly become a 3-star combat emperor?" "That's right. This person was Mu Qing. However, he was Mu Qing after changing his appearance, and now he was called Qin Day. So it's because of this." Qin Feiyong suddenly understood, and then the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. "Speaking of this, it reminds me of what you said to me." Mu Qing's face darkened. The thing he was worried about was indeed going to happen. "Back then, didn't you tell me how amazing and awesome those people were? In the end, when they saw me, why did they run away without even saying goodbye? Is this the elite disciple of your Mu family?" Qin Feiyong sneered. "Continue, I'm listening." Mu Qing was also thick-skinned and did not care at all. "Do you think I'll say it just because you want me to?" Qin Feiyong disdainfully turned around and entered the attic. Mu Qing said, "If you don't say it, then I will. I have been wondering a question. When we first entered the main tower, it was for the heavenly astral flames. Now that we have obtained the heavenly astral flames, why are you still staying in the main tower?" Qin Feiyong's pupils shrank. He turned to look at Mu Qing and suddenly shouted, "Wang Yu, I have something to talk to you about. Come over here." "You win." Mu Qing's face changed, and he immediately opened the portal. "If I wasn't afraid of your Mu family strength, I would have already crippled you." Qin Feiyong snorted from his nose. Mu Qing's body stiffened, and he sneered, "Then let's wait and see. Let's see who will cripple who in the end." After saying that, he stepped into the portal without looking back. "Then let's wait and see." Chapter 1074. What's the matter? Whoosh! Wang Yuer flew over and landed in the courtyard, looking at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Qin Feiyong looked at her in shock. He had thought that with Wang Yuer's character, she wouldn't come, but she did. This was awkward. "What's the matter? Tell me." Wang Yuer urged impatiently. Qin Feiyong had an idea and asked, "Didn't you say in Qinghai last time that you would ask your grandpa and your parents to break off the engagement? Why didn't you do anything?" Wang Yuer's face stiffened. He called her over just for this? Bastard. Did he hate her that much? He couldn't wait to break off the engagement. "I've told them, but they don't want to. There's nothing I can do. Go to them if you can." "If there's nothing else, I'll go back first," Wang Yuer said coldly, then turned around and flew back to the attic. Her face was colder than her tone. "Why are you angry? Don't you all want to break off the engagement?" Qin Feiyong looked at her in confusion. This woman's mind was indeed deeper than the bottom of the sea. Shaking his head, He turned around and entered the room. The next day, the news that Qin Feiyang was still alive had already spread to all the big and small cities and tribes. Similarly, the news of Nya, Xiaoyong, being abused also spread like wildfire. In the Adamantine tribe, in a certain hall, a burly man in black slammed his hand on a desk and said angrily, "Bastard, he even dares to provoke the chief tower master's personal disciple. Is he tired of living? Husband, you can't blame Xiaorong for this. Xiaoyong took a fancy to Li Yan. Although what he did was wrong, he didn't provoke Ancestor Mu. Why did he treat Xiaorong like this in public?" A middle-aged woman next to him said unhappily. This woman was wearing luxurious clothes and her long hair was tied up. She was still charming. "Chief, Madam is right. Ancestor Mu bullied Xiaoyong in public, which means that he doesn't take our Adamantine tribe seriously at all." A young man below said. This person was thin and wore a fitted white robe. He looked to be in his 30s and held a jade flute in his hand. He looked rather scholarly. He was the high priest of the Vajra tribe. The Adamantine chief said, "Then what do you think we should do? He is the chief pagoda master's disciple." The purple-clothed woman said, "Even if he is the chief pagoda master's disciple, he still has to be reasonable." That's right. In that kind of situation, you could have just asked Xiaoyong to apologize. Why did you have to do that? He even crippled Xiaoyong's qi. He's simply taking advantage of his position to bully others. The high priest said. The two of them echoed each other, thoroughly arousing the fury in the Vajra tribe's chief's heart. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll go look for Chief Tower Master to reason with him." After the chief of the Adamantine tribe left, the high priest shook his head and laughed. "Our chief's temper is really fiery. If he didn't do that, would we have a chance?" The purple-clothed woman smiled and snuggled into the high priest's embrace. "That's true. While he's at the chief pagoda, let's go have some fun." The high priest picked up the purple-clothed woman and walked towards the bed with a lewd smile on his face. "Xiaoyong is in trouble, and you still have the mood to think about this?" The purple-clothed woman looked at him with dissatisfaction. "Isn't someone worried about this? Why are we in such a hurry?" The high priest threw the purple-clothed woman on the bed and impatiently pounced on her. For a moment, in the main hall, clothes were flying and moaning. The chief pagoda, Shua, a purple-clothed youth holding a folding fan, appeared above Calm Heart Lake. He looked at the pavilion where Qin Feiyang was and said loudly, "Ancestor Mu, come out for a moment." Qin Feiyang was meditating when he heard the voice. He opened his eyes and walked out of the pavilion. He looked up at the purple-clothed youth and smiled. "Brother Gongsun, what's the matter?" Gongsun Bei said, "The chief pagoda master wants you to go over." "Why does master want me to go over?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "The leader of the Adamantine tribe is here. After hearing this, I don't need to tell you. You should know." Gongsun Bei smiled. "The leader of the Adamantine tribe?" Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Brother Gongsun Bei, can I not go?" "What do you think?" Gongsun Bei said. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and flew over. He landed beside Gongsun Bei and said, "Then let's go." Gongsun Bei said, "We'll fly over." "Fly over?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Wasn't there a portal? Flying over would be a waste of time. Gongsun Bei looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. "I want to take the opportunity to talk to you." "Talk about what?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. "Let's talk as we walk." Gongsun Bei smiled and flew towards the chief pagoda master's courtyard. Qin Feiyang followed behind him, suspiciously. However, after flying for a long time, Gongsun Bei didn't say anything. He just silently flew forward. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Brother Gongsun Bei, if you have anything to say, just say it. Don't be afraid." Gongsun Bei shook his head and smiled. "I'm not only the chief pagoda master's disciple, but also the temple master of the Oracle Temple. What's there to be afraid of?" Then you, Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. Gongsun Bei said, "Did anything happen when you entered Qinghai?" "How do you want me to answer that?" Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, "Anyway, a lot of things happened." Gongsun Bei said, "Then is there anything about the chief pagoda master?" Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank as he looked at Gongsun Bei in surprise. Why did this sound strange? Gongsun Bei turned his head and looked at Qin Feiyang's expression. His eyes flashed with an inexplicable light, then he looked back and smiled. "Actually, I'm the same kind of person as you." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was even more surprised. However, Gongsun Bei didn't explain. He smiled faintly and said, "In the future, no matter what happens or who you meet, you have to be careful." Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. What was this person hinting at? Gongsun Bei still didn't give any explanation. He said, "I have something to ask you. Do you know where your parents went? The day you came back from Qinghai, I went to look for them and found that they had already left." "I don't know. My parents are a pair of wild cranes. They never tell me where they go, and they won't stay in the same place for too long." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Can you contact them?" Gongsun Bei asked. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, "I'm not afraid of Brother Gongsun laughing at me, but I didn't establish a contract with them." "Why? You're their family." Gongsun Bei was surprised. "Yes, family. But they always said that they don't want a good-for-nothing son like me. They also said that I'm not allowed to mention them outside, and I'm not allowed to ask them for help if I encounter any problems. I even suspect that I'm not their biological son." Qin Feiyang said helplessly, "You're thinking too much. They should be doing this to let you grow up independently. After all, most children nowadays grow up under the care of their parents. It's hard to become a big deal if you're spoiled." Gongsun Bei said, "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang showed a look of doubt. "Whether that's the case or not, you'll know when you ask them in the future." Gongsun Bei smiled and said, "In fact, to be honest, I envy your parents." "Envy them for what?" Qin Feiyang asked. "No one can restrain them. They can go wherever they want. It's easy and carefree." Gongsun Bei smiled with a trace of yearning in his eyes. Qin Feiyang said, "Brother Gongsun Bei can do it too." "Me?" Gongsun Bei shook his head and smiled. "Some people, some things, once they take the first step, it's difficult to get away. In fact, it's better to live a simple life. Some people, some things." Qin Feiyang was silent. What was Gongsun Bei hinting at? What kind of secret was he hiding in his heart? Gongsun Bei had always given him the impression that he was a strong, smart, and capable person. But now he suddenly realized that there was another side to Gongsun Bei besides these things on the surface. Melancholy. Desire. Qin Feiyang said, "Brother Gongsun Bei, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask you, but I don't know if I should ask. We're all on the same side. What's there to worry about? Just ask." Gongsun Bei said, "You're also Master's disciple. But why have I never heard you call him Master? You always call him Lord." Qin Feiyang wondered, "Haven't I already finished my apprenticeship? If I still call him Master, others will gossip behind his back." Gongsun Bei smiled. "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang was doubtful. Although Gongsun Bei had finished his apprenticeship, he was still a disciple of the chief tower master. Besides, with Gongsun Bei's strength and status in the chief tower, who dared to gossip behind his back? However, Gongsun Bei did not continue to discuss this topic. He smiled and said, "Tell me what happened in Qinghai. I'm very interested." "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded and told him one by one. But what he said was what young Master Hao and Wang Yu also knew. As for the other things, he chose to hide them. Unknowingly, the chief tower master's courtyard came into their sight. Gongsun Bei looked at the courtyard from afar and said with a smile, "Listening to what you said, this trip to Qinghai was quite exciting. but you should be hiding a lot of things. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. Don't worry. This is your private matter. I won't interfere. But you have to remember that there are some things that you must remember not to talk about. You must rot in your stomach. Gongsun Bei stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. The smile on his face disappeared, and he looked very serious. Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed, and he nodded and said, "Understood." "Then let's go." Gongsun Bei smiled and waved his hand. He landed in front of the courtyard with Qin Feiyang and said respectfully, "My lord, I've brought Ancestor Mu." "Greetings, master." Qin Feiyang also bowed. The chief tower master was sitting in the pavilion. There was a pot of tea and 2 teacups on the stone table. Opposite the chief tower master sat a burly man. It was the chief of the Adamantine tribe. "Come in," Chief Pagoda Master said with a smile as he looked at Qin Feiyang. "Yes." Chapter 10:75. After entering the pavilion, Gongsun Bei stood respectfully behind the Chief Pagoda Master and remained silent. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the Chief Pagoda Master and bowed. "May I ask why Master called this disciple here?" The Chief Pagoda Master pointed at the Adamantine tribe's leader and smiled. "This is the leader of the Adamantine tribe." Qin Feiyang pretended to be surprised and looked at the Adamantine tribe's leader. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, senior." The Adamantine tribe's leader nodded expressionlessly. He seemed to be very dissatisfied with Qin Feiyang. As the saying goes, like father, like son. Nie Xiaoyong was a beast in human clothing. Presumably, this Adamantine tribe's leader was also not a good person. Qin Feiyang was too lazy to pay attention to such a person. He turned his head and looked suspiciously at the Chief Pagoda Master. The Chief Pagoda Master said, "This time the Adamantine tribe's leader came for Nie Xiaoyong." Qin Feiyang's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly said, "Master, please listen to this disciple's explanation. Don't be nervous. I have already asked Gongsun Bei to investigate, so I know the general situation. Although this matter was Nie Xiaoyong's fault, you shouldn't humiliate him in public. So, I hope you can apologize to the Adamantine tribe's leader and let this matter be resolved." The Chief Pagoda Master smiled. "Apologize?" Qin Feiyang frowned. The Chief Pagoda Master said, "You don't even listen to your master's words. This disciple doesn't dare." Qin Feiyang hurriedly shook his head, then turned to the Adamantine tribe's leader and was about to speak. But at this moment, the Adamantine tribe's leader coldly snorted. "Apologizing is already letting you off easy." Hearing this, Gongsun Bei, who was standing behind the Chief Pagoda Master, raised his eyebrows slightly. He seemed a little uncomfortable. Qin Feiyang was also unhappy. He bowed his head and apologized purely because of the Chief Pagoda Master's order. He didn't expect the Adamantine tribe's leader to take advantage of him. He decisively took back the words on the tip of his tongue and turned to the Chief Pagoda Master. "Master, this disciple didn't do anything wrong. Why should I apologize to him?" The Adamantine tribe's leader's face was filled with anger. The Chief Tower Master frowned. Gongsun Bei's eyes flashed. He cupped his hands and said, "Sir, Ancestor Mu is doing this to protect the reputation of our main tower." "What do you mean?" Chief Pagoda Master asked. "Think about it. If Ancestor Mu doesn't come forward to teach Nie Xiaoyong a lesson, then once this matter spreads out, people will definitely criticize us. They will say that our main pagoda is biased towards the juniors of super tribes. In this way, the position of the main pagoda in the hearts of the people will definitely be damaged. Therefore, this subordinate believes that the one who should apologize is not Ancestor Mu, but the leader of the Adamantine tribe. Because he taught such a good son, Gongsun Bei said. "Gongsun Bei, what do you mean? Are you protecting him?" The chief of the Adamantine tribe glared at Gongsun Bei. "Wrong. The main tower is a place that pays particular attention to fairness and justice. As the hall master of the Oracle Hall, I only speak according to the facts and will not side with anyone. Gongsun Bey raised his head and looked at the chief of the Adamantine tribe. The chief of the Adamantine tribe clenched his fists and hurriedly looked at the chief pagoda master, saying, "Sir." The chief pagoda master stretched out his hand and said, "That's enough. What Gongsun Bey said is very reasonable. The main pagoda is a sacred place. We can't break the rules here because of some spoiled brat." The chief of the Adamantine tribe, didn't know what to do. The chief pagoda master raised his teacup and took a sip as he sighed. "Don't hold on to it. If I really made Ancestor Mu apologize to you, it would only make your son even more arrogant. In the future, things will get out of hand. My main pagoda doesn't welcome such a person." The last sentence could be said to have a profound meaning. Yes. The chief of the Adamantine tribe's eyes trembled as he hurriedly agreed. As the chief of a super tribe, how could he not understand the meaning of these words? If Nia Xiaoyong didn't restrain himself, he would most likely be kicked out of the main pagoda. This was something that no super tribe wanted to happen, because once a member of a tribe was kicked out of the main pagoda, not only would their reputation be damaged, but their status would also drop. Most importantly, the chief pagoda master was angry. The chief pagoda master was the ruler of the Forgotten Continent. If he was angered, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing that the chief of the Adamantine tribe was so tactful, the chief pagoda master smiled and said, "Discipline him well. Otherwise, sooner or later, he'll cause a huge disaster." Yes. The chief of the Adamantine tribe nodded and stood up. "I was too reckless this time. I hope sir can forgive me." "That's understandable." The chief pagoda master smiled. "Then I'll take my leave first." The chief of the Adamantine tribe let out a sigh of relief and cupped his hands. "Good." The chief pagoda master nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at the chief of the Adamantine tribe and said indifferently, "You want to leave already? You still haven't apologized to me." The chief of the Adamantine tribe was about to explode in anger, but when he saw Gongsun Bey and the chief pagoda master, he immediately suppressed his anger and cupped his hands, saying, "I'm sorry. It's my fault for not teaching my son properly and causing you trouble. Please forgive me." Qin Feiyong chuckled. "That's more like it. Take care, I won't see you out." The chief of the Adamantine tribe gloomily glanced at him, opened the portal, and walked in with a stomach full of anger. He originally wanted to settle accounts with Qin Feiyong, but in the end, he had to apologize to Qin Feiyong. What was going on? This trip was really frustrating. When the portal disappeared, Qin Feiyong looked at the chief pagoda master and complained, "Master, why did you bother with such a person?" "I also didn't want to bother with him, but for better or worse. He's the chief of the Adamantine tribe. I have to give him some face, right? But I didn't expect him to say such words when you were apologizing. He really doesn't know how to have self-respect." The chief pagoda master shook his head and smiled. Gongsun Bey coldly snorted. "These people are just like that. Show them some face, and they think they're awesome. They don't even know who they're in front of." The chief pagoda master chuckled and looked at Qin Feiyong, saying, "But remember to restrain yourself in the future. Otherwise, people will say that I'm partial to you. Disciple will remember." Qin Feiyong replied, "All right, you can go back." The chief pagoda master waved his hand. "Disciple will take his leave." Qin Feiyong bowed and saluted, then turned around and left. After watching Qin Feiyong leave, the chief pagoda master asked without turning his head, "Did you ask where his parents are now?" "Yes. You don't know where they are." Gongsun Bey briefly explained the situation at the time. There are actually such parents in this world. There really are all kinds of strange things. Fine, let's put this matter aside for now. Now help me do something else. Remove the spies that the other tribes placed in my chief pagoda. The chief pagoda master's tone was filled with killing intent. "HM?" Gongsun Bey was surprised. The chief pagoda master said, "Are you thinking that doing this might cause the other tribes to be dissatisfied?" "Not possibly. They'll definitely be dissatisfied." Gongsun Bei said, "I want them to be dissatisfied, and I want them to be afraid. I want them to know that I don't usually care, not because I'm stupid, but because I'm too lazy to care." The chief pagoda master said. Gongsun Bei's pupils shrank. He nodded and said, "Understood. I'll do it immediately." After saying that, he strode away. The chief pagoda master also stood up and took out a brush, ink, and paper. Swoosh! As the brush moved like a dragon, the word "kill" suddenly appeared. He looked at the word "kill" with a gaze as sharp as a blade. "If you think that my silence is capital for you to become more aggressive, then you are gravely mistaken. There can only be one ruler on the Forgotten Continent, and that is me. Those who dare to go against me, kill." He muttered and waved his hand. The paper with the word "kill" instantly turned to dust. Back to Qin Feiyang. After returning to the soothing lake, he sat beside the tea table and kept thinking about what Gongsun Bei said. He felt that Gongsun Bei seemed to know something. However, due to some reason, he didn't dare to say it out loud, so he used this method to hint at him. "What kind of person are you?" Qin Feiyang rubbed his head, got up and walked to the balcony on the second floor. He looked at the sky and muttered to himself. Buzz! Suddenly, the image crystal in his arms rang. After taking it out, Yan Wei's shadow appeared. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Yan Wei said in a deep voice, "Fu Anshan is indeed an old fox." Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yan Wei said, "You don't know. He didn't destroy that video at all." "What?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. Yan Wei said, before leaving for the Black Wind Mountain, he sent that video to another confidant. Then why did he still do so many tricks in the Black Wind Mountain? Qin Feiyang frowned. "I asked him. He said that if he didn't act like this, would the chief of the divine Python tribe and the high priest believe him? He also wanted to make this show more realistic, so he hid it from me at that time." Yan Wei said, "Amazing. I really underestimated him." Qin Feiyang was amazed. Fu Anshan was able to climb to this height by no means by chance or luck. He was really smart. However, no matter how hard Fu Anshan tried, it was useless. Qin Feiyang asked with a smile, "Is he complacent now?" "Of course." He also said that compared to him, the chief of the divine Python tribe is the difference between an idiot and a genius. Yan Wei nodded and said with a smile, "Then let him be happy first. The happier he is now, the harder he will cry in the future." Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "Is there anything else?" Yan Wei said, "No, I just want to tell you about this." Qin Feiyang thought for a while and asked, "Has he gone to threaten the chief of the divine Python tribe now?" "How would he dare now?" He is also worried that the chief of the divine Python tribe will do something desperate. But after he becomes the deputy pavilion master, he will definitely continue to threaten him. Yan Wei said, "Okay, keep an eye on him. If there is anything, report to me immediately." Qin Feiyang said, "Okay." Yan Wei replied. Qin Feiyang turned off the image crystal, pondered for a while, and sent a message to Fatso. When Fatso's shadow appeared, Qin Feiyang asked, "Has Li Yan calmed down?" How can she calm down so quickly after encountering so many things in a row? Fatso shook his head. "Then you have to keep an eye on her. Where is Chu Xian's tribe?" Qin Feiyang asked. "Are we going now?" Fatso was surprised. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Fatso said, "When you see her parents, you have to be more polite. After all, they are Fat Lord's future mother-in-law. They haven't even started dating yet. Mother-in-law, father-in-law." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said impatiently, "Tell me quickly." Fatso said, "I heard from Chu Xian that her tribe is outside White Cloud City, but Fat Lord has never been there. so he doesn't know the exact location. He doesn't know the coordinates of White Cloud City either. Go and ask around. Okay. Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal, thought for a while, and rose into the air. At this moment, young Master Hao returned from outside. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, "Where are you going?" Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up and said, "You came back just in time. Do you know the coordinates of White Cloud City?" White Cloud City. Young Master Hao was stunned. He pondered for a moment and asked, "Is there a place called White Cloud City in the Central Divine Kingdom?" "Why would I be stupid enough to ask you?" Qin Feiyang slapped his forehead hard, his face full of anger. This guy had never left the Divine City before. How could he know about White Cloud City? Whoosh! He moved and flew toward Wang Yuer's courtyard. "Wait for me. Why are you asking about White Cloud City's coordinates? Is there anything interesting going on?" Chapter 1076. If you want to have fun, you should go to Longfeng House. It's useless to follow me. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. Young Master Hao chuckled. "I don't believe that you'll go to White Cloud City for no reason." Qin Feiyang was helpless. Swoosh! He landed in Wang Yuer's courtyard and smiled. "Wang Yuer, can you come out for a while?" "What do you want?" Wang Yuer's angry shout came from the pavilion. "That," Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly and said, "I really have something to talk to you about this time." Bam! The door was kicked open, and Wang Yuer walked out angrily. She stared at Qin Feiyang and said, "You better have something to talk to me about." Young Master Hao glanced at Wang Yuer and whispered to Qin Feiyang, "Look at her anger. Did you offend her again?" Qin Feiyang touched his nose and smiled at Wang Yuer. "I want to know the coordinates of White Cloud City." White Cloud City. Wang Yuer raised her brows and nodded. "I know where White Cloud City is, but why are you going there?" Young Master Hao chuckled. "To meet an old flame." Qin Feiyang's face darkened. This bastard really wanted to stir up trouble. As expected, hearing young Master Hao's words, Wang Yuer was so angry that her face turned green. She wanted to chop Qin Feiyang into pieces. No matter what, he had a fiancée now. How could he go on a date with an old flame? The worst thing was that he came to ask her, his fiancée in name, for the coordinates. How could she endure this? Qin Feiyang saw that the situation was bad and quickly comforted her. "Don't listen to his nonsense. I'm just going there to do something. I'm not talking nonsense." Young Master Hao shrugged, but there was a sinister smile in his eyes. "You're not done?" Qin Feiyang's veins were popping. Was it not chaotic enough? Wang Yuer gritted her teeth and nodded. "All right, I'll tell you the coordinates of the White Cloud City, but you have to bring me along. I'd like to see how beautiful this old lover of yours that you're so obsessed with is." Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, looking distressed. "Brother Mu, don't tell me you still can't tell? I've already fallen in love with you." Looking at Qin Feiyang's expression, young Master Hao sighed inwardly and felt extremely helpless. Actually, he was deliberately provoking Wang Yuer in order to make Wang Yuer jealous and then inadvertently reveal her care for Qin Feiyang. Obviously, he had achieved his goal. Wang Yuer was very jealous now. However, what gave him a headache was that Qin Feiyang didn't realize it, even though Wang Yuer had made it so obvious. His EQ was worrying. Buzz. Wang Yuer waved her hand and opened a portal. She said coldly, "Hurry up if you want to go. Don't waste time." Qin Feiyang glared at young Master Hao and sighed helplessly. He had no choice but to walk in. Wang Yuer and young Master Hao quickly followed him. White Cloud City. It was a city that was neither too small nor too small. The buildings were located in a picturesque manner. The ancient city walls were like a giant python that surrounded the city, emitting a cold aura. Outside the city, on a wide road, two men and a woman walked side by side. The three of them looked like companions, but none of them spoke. The atmosphere was very unfriendly. It was Qin Feiyang and the other two. However, they had all changed their appearances and concealed their cultivation level. As the White Cloud City was not as remote as Qinghai City, and the three of them had extraordinary identities, they would be easily recognized and would definitely cause a commotion. Qin Feiyang had disguised himself as a muscular young man. He glanced at Wang Yuer, whose face was as cold as ice, and felt a throbbing pain in his head. Well, I'd like to explain. After hesitating for a while, he finally decided to tell Wang Yuer the purpose of his trip to the White Cloud City, this time to prevent the misunderstanding from worsening. Who am I to you? Do you need to explain to me? However, before Qin Feiyang could speak, Wang Yuer said coldly, All right, I'm too lazy to waste my breath. Qin Feiyang was also angry. Why was this woman so unreasonable? Sigh. Looking at the two of them arguing, young master Hao shook his head helplessly. It seemed that he had helped them out of kindness this time. After a while, the three of them arrived at the city gate. In front of the city gate, there were 4 guards standing guard. Their cultivation levels were between 1 star and 2-star battle ancestors. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. Brothers, may I know how to get to the Chu family? Chu family? The 4 of them looked at each other in confusion. One of them asked, Which Chu family? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked suspiciously, Are there many Chu families in the White Cloud City? The guard smiled. Brother, this is your first time in the White Cloud City, right? Qin Feiyang nodded. No wonder you don't know. There are a total of 2 Chu families in the White Cloud City. There is one in the city, which is a wealthy family. There is another outside the city, which is a tribe called the Heavenly Spiral Tribe. The guard said, So that's the case. Qin Feiyang came to a realization and said with a smile, I want to ask about the Heavenly Spiral Tribe. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe is in the east of the city, which is more than 200 miles away from the White Cloud City. However, forgive me for asking, why are you going to the Heavenly Spiral Tribe? The guard asked. Qin Feiyang said, There are some things I need to settle. The guard nodded and said, Then you must be careful. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe is not a friendly place. Not a friendly place? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, Brother, what do you mean? The guard said with disgust, The Heavenly Spiral Tribe is a super tribe in our area. They are usually arrogant, self-righteous, and look down on others. In short, no one likes them in the White Cloud City. It can't be. Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect the Heavenly Spiral Tribe to have such a bad reputation. I'm not lying to you. In our White Cloud City, the Heavenly Spiral Tribe is famous for being overbearing. Some of the disciples in the tribe often bully men and women in the White Cloud City. The guard said. Young master Hao raised his eyebrows and asked, Does the White Cloud City not have a city lord? Of course, but our city lord doesn't dare to interfere. The guard sighed. Why? Young master Hao was suspicious. Because the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader has a daughter called Chu Xian. She entered the main tower and is a disciple of the main tower. A disciple of the main tower has a noble status. How would our city lord dare to offend her? The guard shook his head. Young master Hao was furious and said, Just because a daughter entered the main tower, they dare to be so arrogant. They have no respect for the law. Law. Little brother, you must be joking. Things like the law are only targeted at us, the weak. To the Heavenly Spiral Tribe, their words are the law. The guard sneered. Young master Hao clenched his fists. His eyes were extremely gloomy. Qin Feiyang glanced at young master Hao and said inwardly, Are you angry? This is the way of the world. Even though the forgotten continent is under your father's control, the heavens are high and the emperor is far away. Who would really listen to him? Sigh. Young master Hao sighed deeply. The more he was involved in the world, the more he felt that this world was strange. It was completely different from what he imagined. Qin Feiyang looked at the four bodyguards and calmly asked, "Then, for big brothers, are you familiar with Chu Xian? What do you think of her as a person?" One of the guards said, "We were all born in the White Cloud City. Of course, we are familiar with Chu Xian. As for her, scram." Suddenly, a loud shout interrupted the guard's words. Qin Feiyang and the other two turned around and saw a purple-clothed youth of 18 or 19 years old riding a giant golden tiger on the main road in the distance. He was rushing towards them. His face was filled with an insufferably arrogant expression. Behind the purple-clothed youth was a group of burly men in tight robes. They were also riding giant black tigers. They looked ferocious and aggressive. "Oh no, they're here again." The four guards' expressions changed. Qin Feiyang looked at the four guards and frowned. "Who are they?" "That purple-clothed youth is called Chu Outyin. He's the son of the Heavenly Spiral tribe's leader. This person is extremely arrogant because of the faction behind him. He doesn't take anyone seriously. He even dared to scold our city lord." The four guards said. Qin Feiyang raised his brows. The son of the Heavenly Spiral tribe's leader. Wouldn't that make him Chu Xian's younger brother? In that case, he would be Fatso's brother-in-law in the future. Suddenly, a scream was heard. Qin Feiyang turned around and saw a passerby who did not dodge in time and was sent flying by the giant golden tiger under Chu Outyin. He spat out blood. "Stop!" Chu Outyin looked at the passerby and shouted at the giant golden tiger under him. "Roar!" The giant golden tiger let out a roar and immediately came to a halt. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang thought that Chu Outyin was going to apologize to the passerby. However, what he did not expect was that Chu Outyin did not apologize. Instead, he looked down at the passerby and shouted, "How dare you block my way?" The passerby's eyes trembled. He did not care about the injuries on his body and hurriedly knelt on the ground and begged, "Young Master Outyin, I was wrong. Please spare my life. Do you think you can settle this with just 'I was wrong'? Don't you know who this young master is? Kill him for this young master." Chu Outyin smiled contemptuously. As he snorted, a burly man behind him raised his hand and pointed in the air. A battle chi broke through the air and swept toward the passerby's forehead. "He's trying to kill him?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Wasn't this person being too unreasonable? In the next moment, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took a step forward and stood in front of the passerby. He raised his head and waved his hand gently. The battle chi that broke through the air disintegrated. Chu Outyin looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. The group of burly men behind him also revealed astonishment in their eyes. How dare he come out and meddle in their business? Was he stupid? The four guards also changed their expressions and hurriedly sent a voice transmission to young Master Hao and Wang Yuer. "You too, quickly call your companions back. You can't afford to offend Chu Outyin. He will bring you a disaster. Can't afford to offend him." Young Master Hao and Wang Yuer looked at each other with a cold expression. What was Chu Outyin? He was just a good-for-nothing from a small tribe. They were the ones who could not afford to offend. Chapter 1077. Qin Feiyang frowned. He instantly felt extremely disgusted with Fatso's future brother-in-law. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was silent, Chu Outyin said angrily, "Didn't you hear what I said?" "I heard you," Qin Feiyang said. "You could have spoken, but I thought you were mute. Now tell me, how are you going to compensate me for my loss?" Chu Outyin stared at him arrogantly. "Loss?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. He pointed at the passerby behind him and said, "Brother, what loss do you have?" Chu Outyin said, "You stopped my men from killing him in front of everyone and made me lose face. Isn't that a loss?" Qin Feiyang was completely speechless. This person was no longer just a playboy. He was simply a malignant tumor. Everyone saw it. You were the one who drove your mount around and injured others. Now you want me to compensate you for your loss. Can you be more shameless? Qin Feiyang said. Chu Outyen's face turned cold. A burly man behind him shouted, "How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to young Master Outyen like that?" Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "I don't know who I am, but I know that you people are worse than animals. How dare you? You're too presumptuous. Young Master Outyen, please let me cripple him." The burly man was furious. His eyes flashed fiercely. Chu Outyen smiled mockingly and nodded. "Okay, go cripple him, but don't kill him. I want to keep him alive and torture him. Understood?" The burly man smiled sinisterly. He rode his black tiger and walked toward Qin Feiyang step by step. "It's over. That kid is dead." "Yes, no one who dares to go against Chu Outyen will live to see the sun tomorrow." More and more people gathered around. When they saw this scene, they could not help but whisper. Not only did these discussions enter Qin Feiyang's ears, they also entered the ears of Chu Outyen and the others. The group of people couldn't help but laugh proudly. But at the same time, Qin Feiyang's smile was even brighter than theirs. He looked at Chu Outyen and said, "Let me give you a piece of advice. It's best if your lackeys don't do anything." Chu Aotian's cultivation was unbearable to look at. He was merely a one-star combat emperor. As for the group of big men, their strength was not bad. They were all 9-star Warsects, but that was only limited to the White Cloud City. In his eyes, they were inferior to ants. "Ioyo, you're acting so awesome now. You almost scared this young master to death." Chu Outyen patted his chest and said with a strange smile in a timid voice. "Haha." Those burly men also laughed wantonly. Qin Feiyang's gaze swept over the group of people, and his eyes suddenly turned cold. Saint's aura roared out, suppressing everyone present. "What? He's a battle saint." Everyone's eyes trembled. This Chu Outyen was also dumbfounded. The group of burly men was also dumbfounded. How dare a small and insignificant tribe be so arrogant? Who gave you the courage? Qin Feiyang's killing intent was aroused. He took a step forward and landed in front of the burly man who was walking towards him. He raised his hand and slapped him. Crack! Ah! Accompanied by a shrill scream, the burly man's head was crushed on the spot. Blood splattered across the sky. Chu Outyen's face immediately turned pale. "I really don't know how a person like you can live until today." Qin Feiyang took another step forward and landed in the middle of the group of burly men behind Chu Outyen. He raised his hand and slapped down. One by one, the burly men died tragically. Moreover, their heads were all crushed, and their blood dyed the ground red. In less than 5 breaths, all the burly men were killed. Qin Feiyang flickered and landed in front of Chu Outyen. He saw that Chu Outyen's face was completely pale. His eyes were filled with fear, as if he was looking at a devil. He was very arrogant. However, he had bullied those who were afraid of the Heavenly Spiral tribe. Now, the person in front of him was obviously not afraid of the Heavenly Spiral tribe. He finally realized that he had hit a wall this time. Qin Feiyang looked at him, shook his head and sighed. "Life is so beautiful. Why don't you cherish it?" Long Outyen stammered. He was so scared that he couldn't even speak. His previous awe-inspiring aura had long disappeared. He was like a desperate dog. Everyone thought that Qin Feiyang would kill Chu Outyen, especially young Master Hao and Wang Yu. With regards to Qin Feiyang, they could be considered to have a very good understanding of him now. What he hated the most was this kind of profligate son who relied on his power to bully others. Moreover, Qin Feiyang didn't even take the direct descendants of the major tribe seriously, let alone the young master of a small tribe. Nie Xiaoyong was the best example. However, the result was far beyond their expectations. Qin Feiyang actually withdrew his saint aura and said indifferently, "Go. I hope this lesson will make you understand something." Chu Aotian looked at him in horror. He immediately rode the huge golden tiger and fled in a sorry state. Young Master Hao walked forward and said suspiciously, "Brother Mu, what's wrong with you today? Why did you let him go?" "I can't help it." Qin Feiyang shook his head, helplessly. He had to do this for Fatso's happiness, because once he killed Chu Outyen, he would completely fall out with the Chu family. At that time, it would be even more impossible for Fatso and Chu Xian to be together. Humph! I think some people just don't want to offend their old sweetheart. Wang Yu snorted through her nose. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Young Master Hao also looked at her suspiciously. Wang Yu coldly glanced at Qin Feiyang and said to young Master Hao, "Silly brother, don't you know? That woman named Chu Xian is very close to him." "Really?" Young Master Hao was surprised. "Of course. I also know that some people have troubled Guofeng because of Chu Xian, just because Chu Xian is Guofeng's ex-boyfriend," Wang Yu said sarcastically. This, young Master Hao looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise and said, "Brother, you're not really here to meet your old sweetheart, are you?" "Silly brother, you're still too naive. He's not here to meet his old sweetheart. He's here to meet his future father-in-law and mother-in-law." Wang Yu sneered. Qin Feiyang's forehead was full of black lines as he angrily said, "Can you guys stop making wild guesses?" Wang Yu said, "Are you making wild guesses? Or is it true? You know in your heart." "It's over. The vinegar jar is completely overturned." Young Master Hao muttered secretly. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead and felt that his head was about to explode. All of a sudden, he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Wang Yu strangely. "What?" Wang Yu raised her eyebrows. Qin Feiyang said, "That's not right. How do you know about Chu Xian and me so clearly? Are you investigating me behind my back?" Wang Yu immediately became unnatural and shouted angrily, "Who do you think you are? Do you think I'll investigate you? Don't be narcissistic." "Investigate," young Master Hao looked at Wang Yu, in a daze and suddenly pursed his lips with a trace of playfulness. She was secretly investigating Qin Feiyang. It seemed that this sister of his was quite attentive. It also proved that his sister really fell in love with him, but she was too headstrong and didn't want to admit it. "You three, go quickly." At this time, the 4 guards walked over and urged him. "Why should we go?" Young Master Hao asked suspiciously, "You killed the people of the Heavenly Spiral tribe. They definitely won't let you go." "Yes. There are not many good people in the world. It's not worth it if you die here because of this. Don't hesitate. Go quickly. I'm afraid it'll be too late if you don't go now." The 4 of them advised earnestly. Young Master Hao raised his eyebrows and wanted to say something. Qin Feiyang reached out and stopped him. He looked at the 4 guards and said with a smile, "We'll leave immediately. But you 4 haven't told me what kind of person Chu Xian is." "We don't know about the current Chu Xian, but the Chu Xian in the past was not a simple character." One of the guards said, "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was curious. "I'll tell you a real example. I remember that before Chu Xian entered the main tower, there was a man who liked her very much. He was even willing to sacrifice himself for her without hesitation. At that time, Chu Xian seemed to like him very much. However, after Chu Xian entered the main tower, the man went to find her again. In the end, not only did he not win her back, but he was also ruthlessly driven away by Chu Xian. It was said that there was another man beside Chu Xian at that time. He seemed to be a direct descendant of a big tribe. We don't know his name, but his surname seems to be Guo. In the end, after the man who was abandoned by Chu Xian returned to the White Cloud City, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol and was depressed. One day, while he was drunk, he ran to the Heavenly Spiral tribe to reason with Chu Xian's parents. Guess what happened? Chu Xian's father actually killed him on the spot. The guard said, "What?" Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. Without a doubt, that person with the surname Gua was definitely Guofeng. Next, he looked at the guard and asked, "Is it true?" He had met Chu Xian a few times. From those few times, she did not seem like the kind of person that the guard described. The guard said, "Basically everyone in the White Cloud City knows about it. How can it be false? It's just that everyone is too afraid of the Heavenly Spiral tribe, so no one dares to talk about it. I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect her to be such a woman." Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Since everyone in the city knew about it, then it must be true. Wang Yuer glanced at him and secretly sneered. "Are you very disappointed?" Disappointed? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He was indeed a little disappointed, but most of all, he felt that it was not worth it for Fatso. In order to win Chu Xian's heart, Fatso could be said to have put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of effort. However, in the end, it was just an illusion. "Thank you for telling me, brothers. I'll take my leave." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and thanked the 4 guards before turning to leave. Wang Yuer and young Master Hao looked at each other and strode after him. Not long after the 3 of them left, a black-clothed old man and a dozen burly men descended above the city gate. "Greetings, Butler Chu." The pupils of the 4 guards shrank, and they hurriedly bowed in salute. This was the butler of the Heavenly Spiral tribe. The black-clothed old man said sternly, "Where's the little bastard who killed my tribesmen?" "They've already left," the 4 guards said. "Which direction did they go?" The black-clothed old man's eyes flashed with killing intent as he asked. "That way." The 4 guards pointed in the opposite direction of Qin Feiyang's group. The onlookers didn't make a sound. "You're dreaming if you think you can just walk away after killing someone from my Heavenly Spiral tribe." The black-clothed old man smiled coldly and led the dozen burly men away at lightning speed. After the black-clothed old man and his group disappeared, the 4 guards looked at each other and smiled. They looked at the surrounding crowd and waved their hands. "Hurry up and disperse, lest you attract trouble." The crowd immediately dispersed. Chapter 1078. At the same time, White Cloud City, outside the city, on the peak of a certain mountain, Qin Feiyang stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the mountains and rivers below. His eyes were filled with worry. He really did not know how to tell Fatso about this, because this was the first time Fatso truly fell in love with a woman. If he knew about this, it would definitely be a heavy blow to him. Young Master Hao walked up and patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder, comforting him. "Brother Mu, there are plenty of fish in the sea. Why do you have to hurt yourself over such a woman?" He really thought that there was something between Qin Feiyang and Chu Xian. "Why are you comforting him?" "He asked for it. Serves him right." Wang Yuter gloated. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "The one who likes Chu Xian is really not me." The 2 looked at each other, their eyes full of suspicion. Qin Feiyang turned to Wang Yuer and said helplessly, "I wanted to tell you just now, but you didn't let me. In fact, it's one of my brothers who likes Chu Xian." The 2 looked at each other. Young Master Hao asked, "Are you sure it's your brother who likes her and not you?" Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. "Do I need to lie to you about this?" Young Master Hao said, "Of course. What if you don't want us to laugh at you because you want to save face? That's why you came up with such a lousy excuse. With your imagination, it's a pity that you don't become a scriptwriter." Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, "You should have heard of my brother. It's that Fatso who taught Nia Xiaoyong a lesson yesterday. It's him." Young Master Hao came to a realization and chuckled. "I knew it. My sister is such a beautiful and capable woman, but you don't like her. How could you like a woman like Chu Xian? Wang Yuer had just heaved a sigh of relief when she heard young Master Hao's words. Her face darkened immediately. She said angrily, "No one will think you're mute if you keep quiet." Young Master Hao smiled embarrassedly, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Since your brother likes her, what are you doing here?" "I'm just here to sound out Chu Xian's parents." Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly and briefly explained the situation. "I see. Then this brother of yours really has no foresight." Young Master Hao shook his head. "You can't blame him for not having a good eye. Chu Xian hid it so well that even I didn't notice it. The problem now is that I don't dare to tell him these things because he will definitely break down." Qin Feiyang rubbed his temples, his face full of worry. Wang Yuer said, "You'd better not hesitate about this. Tell him as soon as possible so that he won't fall deeper and deeper. As for whether he will collapse or not, it depends on his endurance." "Who?" Qin Feiyang glanced at her, exhaled deeply, and took out an image crystal. Wang. Very soon, Fatty's silhouette floated out. Seeing that it was Qin Feiyang, Fatso immediately asked expectantly, "Boss, how is it?" "You'd better not expect too much," Qin Feiyang said. Fatso's face fell immediately, and he said, "They still don't agree?" Qin Feiyang sighed and said, "I haven't gone to see them yet, but I've heard some things in White Cloud City. You'd better be mentally prepared." "You didn't go?" Fatso was stunned, and he rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang, speechless. "You almost scared me to death. Tell me, what did you hear?" "Chu Xian is not the kind of person you think." Qin Feiyang told Fatso everything he heard in detail. There was no suspense. Hearing this, Fatso felt as if he was struck by lightning. "I don't believe it. You must be lying to me." "Yes, you're lying to me. She's definitely not that kind of person." After a moment of silence, Fatso exploded, and he shook his head frantically, his face full of disbelief. "Calm down," Qin Feiyang shouted. "No, I can't calm down. I'm going to ask her face to face," Fatso shouted hysterically. "Enough. If you continue like this, I'll be angry," Qin Feiyang shouted. Fatso quivered, and he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Boss, you don't understand how I feel now." "I understand." "It's because I understand that I hesitated for a long time whether to tell you." Qin Feiyang sighed. Fatso said anxiously, "But I can't believe it. I've been with her for so long, and she's not that kind of person." All right. I know that no matter what I say now, you won't believe it. Wait for me. I'll confirm it for you. And before I confirm it, don't go looking for her again. If I find out that you secretly went to look for her, then don't blame me for being hostile." After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned off the image crystal. Young Master Hao sighed. "This brother of yours is very affectionate." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "After all, it's the first time." "Then, how many times are you?" Wang Yuer asked without warning. Qin Feiyang instinctively wanted to answer, but fortunately he was alert and reacted. He squinted at Wang Yuer and said indifferently, "What does it have to do with you how many times I've done it?" Young Master Hao patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder and laughed. "Brother, don't pretend. I think you haven't even done it once. So you're still a chick." Wang Yuer covered her mouth and laughed. Qin Feiyang stared at young Master Hao in dissatisfaction. Why did this guy always undermine him? Professional demolition business? Then he looked at Wang Yuer and said jokingly, "You're so good at talking. Then tell me, how many men did you have before?" "Get lost," Wang Yuer immediately shouted coldly. He made it sound like she was a fickle woman. Although she did like to rape some stinky men before, she was still very pure, okay? And she had never done anything out of line. "Only you can say it, but not me. Is there a person as reasonable as you?" Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. "You're a man, okay? Is that all you can do?" Wang Yuer said angrily. Men are also human beings. Why must they be bullied by you women? Qin Feiyang glanced at her indifferently. Wang Yuer was furious. Okay. You start quarreling without saying a word. I really admire you. Young Master Hao rolled his eyes at the two of them, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, How do you want to prove it? Chu Xian will never admit this kind of thing in person. I don't know either. Qin Feiyang shook his head and felt a headache coming on. Wang Yuer said, In my opinion, Chu Xian just treats your brother as a spare tire. Spare tire? Qin Feiyang looked at her suspiciously. To be honest, your brother is really not good looking. With Chu Xian's taste, it would be strange if she fell in love with him. I guess that Chu Xian may have seen that he has a good relationship with you, so she hasn't rejected him. Wang Yuer said. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said, Now that you mention it, it reminds me of something Fatso said to me. What is it? Wang Yuer asked. Qin Feiyang said, Fatso said that Chu Xian was neither close nor distant to him, and she seemed to be playing hard to get. That's right. I'm a woman and I know women. Chu Xian must value your relationship with Fatso. I can guarantee that once someone better than Fatso appears, she will dump Fatso without hesitation. There's another possibility. She's using Fatso to find an opportunity to get close to you. After all, you're now the Chief Tower Master's disciple. As long as she hooks up with you, the Heavenly Spiral tribe will definitely soar. Wang Yuer speculated. Young Master Hao frowned and said, If that's the case, then she's too much. If that's the case, I'll make her regret it for the rest of her life. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. He looked at the two of them and said, I want to make a trip to the Heavenly Spiral tribe. Do you want to go back first? Young Master Hao smiled and said, Since we're already here, let's go together. Wang Yuer said, I also want to see what kind of people this tribe is. You really like to join in the fun. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He then jumped down and disappeared into the mountains below. Young Master Hao looked at Qin Feiyang's back and turned to Wang Yuer. He smiled and said, Sister, you can rest assured now. Rest assured about what? Wang Yuer said indifferently. Still pretending? I already know what you're thinking. Don't hide it. If you love, say it out loud. If you expect Ancestor Mu to take the initiative to tell you, that's impossible. Although he's very smart in other aspects, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that no one can compare to him, he's an idiot when it comes to love. Young Master Hao chuckled. I'm a woman. Why should I take the initiative? Wang Yuer snorted in dissatisfaction. See, admit it yourself. Since you've admitted it, then let go and love. Life is short, don't leave any regrets. Young Master Hao patted Wang Yuer's shoulder and jumped, chasing after Qin Feiyang. Wang Yuer was stunned, then gritted her teeth and said angrily, You little bastard, how dare you trick me? See how I'll deal with you. After saying that, she chased after him fiercely. Heavenly Spiral tribe. Strictly speaking, in the Central Divine Kingdom, this tribe could only be considered a small, insignificant tribe, because the entire tribe only had a few 100,000 people. The strongest one was a 9-star battle saint. However, although the Heavenly Spiral tribe was not comparable to those big tribes, its territory was still very large. Moreover, like the other super tribes, they also built a city of their own. It was just that the scale could not be compared to the cities of the other super tribes, and they did not have their own patterns. About half an hour later, Qin Feiyang and the other two stopped above a mountain ridge. They looked at the Heavenly Spiral tribe from afar, then activated the concealment technique and directly sneaked in. Although the city was not big, it was quite prosperous. The streets were bustling with people, and the shops on both sides were dazzling. The three of them walked openly on the street, and no one could see them. Young Master Hao sent a sound transmission. Brother Mu, the more I look at your concealment technique, the more I like it. How about this? I'll use the divine art I got from the land of inheritance to exchange with you. In your dreams, Qin Feiyang said without turning his head. In terms of practicality, the concealment technique was more valuable than the divine art. Moreover, he did not lack the divine art, so there was no need to exchange it. Chapter 1079. Many tribal leaders lived in the center of the tribal city, and the Heavenly Spiral tribe was no exception, because it was a symbol of status, representing a superior status. The residence of the Heavenly Spiral tribe's leader was a huge mansion, occupying almost 1/10 of the city. It was magnificent and magnificent. The security around the mansion was very tight. It could be said that there was a sentry every 3 steps and a sentry every 7 steps. And the people guarding the mansion were basically burly men, whose cultivation was between 5-star and 9-star battle masters. If it was an ordinary person, it would be very difficult to break in. But Qin Feiyang swaggered in with young master Hao and the other 2. In a garden, young master Hao glanced around and frowned. The mansion is so big, where are we going to find the leader of the Heavenly Spiral tribe? There shouldn't be many 9-star battle saints in the Heavenly Spiral tribe. Let me sense. Wang Yuer said and then closed her eyes. No need. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and looked up at the sky above the mansion. Wang Yuer opened her eyes and looked up suspiciously, only to see an old figure appear out of thin air. It was the housekeeper who had chased them before. Seeing the housekeeper appear, young master Hao's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, he will definitely report to the leader of the Heavenly Spiral tribe as soon as he comes back. We just need to follow him. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded, waved his arm, and took young master Hao and the other 2 into the sky. Whoosh! At the same time, the housekeeper glanced at the mansion and rushed to a courtyard below. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 followed behind him. Soon, the 4 of them entered the courtyard one after another. The size of the courtyard was about 500 or 600 meters. In addition to an exquisite attic, there was also a small garden with hundreds of flowers in full bloom, attracting bees and butterflies. After the housekeeper landed in the courtyard, he went straight to the attic. The attic was richly ornamented and had an ancient charm. The door was half closed and no sound could be heard. The housekeeper walked to the door and bowed. Leader, this old servant is back. Come in. A deep voice came from inside. The housekeeper strode in. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 followed in silently. They immediately saw a man and a woman sitting in the hall. Both of them looked middle-aged. The man was burly and muscular. He had short black hair and was nearly 2 meters tall. He looked like a small giant. The woman was wearing a long purple dress with a golden hairpin on her head. She looked graceful and luxurious. Behind the 2 of them stood a purple-clothed youth. It was Chu Aotian. Seeing the butler walk in, Chu Aotian immediately ran up and asked hurriedly, "Where is he now?" Quickly bring this young master there. This young master will definitely let him taste the feeling of living a life worse than death. The butler's expression turned ugly. What is it? Chu Aotian frowned. The butler sighed deeply and bowed. Young master, this old servant is incompetent and couldn't find him. What? Chu Aotian was furious. He roared in exasperation. You've brought so many people there, but you still haven't found him. Are you all useless? The middle-aged man frowned and shouted, Ao, Tian, step aside. Father! Chu Aotian turned around and looked at the middle-aged man. His face was filled with anger. He was about to say something, but the middle-aged man glared at him, and he obediently stepped aside. The middle-aged man glanced at him and asked the butler, What happened? The butler said, Perhaps he was worried that we would take revenge. When this old servant rushed to White Cloud City, he had already left. You didn't chase after him? The middle-aged man asked. Yes, but we didn't see him even after a few 100 miles. The butler said. What about the others? The middle-aged man asked. The butler said, We're still tracking. The middle-aged man nodded and said with a murderous aura, If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Understood. The butler responded respectfully and turned to leave. The purple-clothed woman looked at the middle-aged man and asked, Husband, should we inform little Xian? Inform her for what? The middle-aged man looked at her in confusion. This person knew Out Yen's identity, but he still dared to kill the people around him in public. This is enough to show that he's not afraid of our heavenly spiral tribe at all. Moreover, I've never seen this face before. He shouldn't be from this area. The purple-clothed woman said. The middle-aged man frowned and said, Madam, do you mean that this person might be from another large tribe? Yes. The purple-clothed woman nodded and said, Little Xian is knowledgeable in the main tower. If this person is really from a large tribe, she should be able to recognize him. The middle-aged man's gaze trembled and he nodded. Madam, you're right. We do need to ask little Xian, lest we provoke someone we shouldn't. After saying that, he took out the image crystal. Young Master Hao laughed secretly. He even knows to inquire about your identity first. It seems that although this leader of the heavenly spiral tribe is domineering, he still has some awareness. Qin Feiyang said, if he didn't have some awareness, how could the heavenly spiral tribe have survived until today? I'm afraid they would have been wiped out long ago. Young Master Hao smiled. Buzz. A moment later, Chu Xian's image appeared. The middle-aged man stood up and smiled. Little Xian, how have you been? His tone and attitude actually had a hint of flattery. However, facing the middle-aged man's attitude, Chu Xian didn't resist at all. Instead, she seemed to enjoy it. I'm fine. Why did you send me a message? Even her tone was very cold, as if she was a high and mighty empress. There's a small matter. Not long ago, your brother brought people to White Cloud City. In the end, he was blocked by a reckless person and killed many of our people. I just want to ask, do you know him? The middle-aged man waved his hand and his battle aura surged, condensing into Qin Feiyang's disguised appearance. Chu Xian sized up the image and shook her head. I've never seen him before. He shouldn't be anyone famous. That's good. The middle-aged man heaved a sigh of relief and said, Is that fatso still harassing you? Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and he took out the image crystal. At the same time, Chu Xian frowned slightly and said, Speaking of this, I'm quite puzzled. What's wrong? The middle-aged man asked. Chu Xian said, In the past, he would come to me on time every morning to please me. But these 2 days, he hasn't come to me even once. Fatso had been watching Li Yan these 2 days. Of course, it was impossible for him to go to her. Why is that? Has he given up? The middle-aged man was suspicious. It shouldn't be possible, because if he had given up, he would have done so long ago. There's no need to pester me for so long. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, my goal is to admire my ancestor. If it weren't for his good relationship with my ancestor, I wouldn't have bothered with him. Chu Xian snorted coldly. That's right. He should look in the mirror and see what kind of person he is. He still wants to eat swan meat. How ridiculous. The middle-aged man also laughed. Sure enough, I guessed right. Wang Yue muttered. This woman is not simple. She was with Guo Feng before. She must have coveted Guo Feng's family background. Young Master Hao sighed. This woman's scheming was simply terrifying. At the same time, Qin Feiyang's eyes were also surging with cold light. Hu Chu Xian had nothing to do with him, but since she dared to use fatso, she could never be forgiven. Chu Xian looked at the middle-aged man and said, Is there anything else? No. The middle-aged man shook his head. Before his voice died away, Chu Xian's virtual image dissipated. She didn't even say a word of farewell, looking extremely arrogant and indifferent. Wang Yu said in disgust, "This woman is really disgusting. Although this family wasn't anything good, as children, shouldn't they respect their parents?" But she couldn't find the slightest respect on Chu Xian's face. She even treated her own parents like this, let alone outsiders. She was very bad. Young Master Hao turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, "What are you going to do?" "Let them despair and regret." Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. He put away the image crystal and left with young Master Hao and Wang Yu. The main tower, Soothing Lake. Qin Feiyang and the other two sat at the tea table, drinking tea silently. Next to them, Fatso raised his head and stared at the image transmitted by the image crystal. His hands were tightly clenched together, and his face was full of pain. Ever since Qin Feiyang sent him a message, he had been praying that this was a misunderstanding. However, the truth beat him mercilessly. "So, you were just using me. I like you so much. Why did you do this to me? You're too ruthless." He muttered to himself, and tears came out uncontrollably. Qin Feiyang couldn't bear it. He put down the teacup, got up and patted him heavily on the shoulder, saying, "A man bleeds, but not tears." Fatso wiped away his tears, turned to look at Qin Feiyang, and said, "Boss, I want the Heavenly Spiral tribe to disappear." Every word was sonorous and powerful, containing an undispersible, murderous intent. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "The Heavenly Spiral tribe will disappear, and it won't be too late. Leave this matter to me." Young Master Hao got up and smiled. Wang Yu frowned and said angrily, "What are you doing?" This young master also doesn't like them. Young Master Hao shrugged. Qin Feiyang turned to look at young Master Hao, cupped his hands, and said with a smile, "Thank you. We're family. What's there to be polite about?" Young Master Hao rolled his eyes at him, looked at Fatso, and said, "Don't worry, this young master will make that woman suffer so much that she'll beg you to marry her. I'm no longer interested in such a woman. However, if I can see her in pain and despair, it's also pleasing to the eye." Fatso sneered. "Ha! After suffering such a blow, you can still calm down so quickly. Your psychological quality is quite good. Originally, we were still worried that when you found out about this, you would seek death." Young Master Hao laughed. "What a joke! After following boss for so many years, how can my psychological quality not be strong? This little blow, at most, will only make me sad for a while. Seek death? That doesn't exist." Fatso shook his head and said. Young Master Hao gave him a thumbs up and said, "I admire you." The fatty said, "I also quite admire you. You turned from a hedonistic son of rich parents to a young and promising man in such a short time." Young Master Hao was stunned and said speechlessly, "When was I a playboy? Moreover, even if I'm a playboy, I'm much better than that Chu Outyin." Fatso nodded seriously and said, "Yes, not as good as the best, but better than the worst." Young Master Hao's face darkened, and he said angrily, "Why are you so annoying?" "Can't help it. I was born to be annoying." Fatso touched his chin and chuckled. Seeing that Fatso was not ashamed but proud, young Master Hao was speechless for a moment and could only helplessly shake his head. Chapter 1080. After chatting for a while, Fatso got up and left, continuing to keep an eye on Lien. Young Master Hao and Wang Yu also left. Heavenly Spiral Tribe! Chu Xian, a cold glint flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. He walked up to the second floor, sat on the balcony, took a battle chi pill, and closed his eyes to cultivate. Time passed in the blink of an eye and night fell. Heavenly Spiral Tribe. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader sat on a throne made of gold, looking down at the steward standing below. He said angrily, "It's been a day, and you still haven't found him. What's the point of me keeping you? Leader, please calm down. I've really tried my best." The steward quickly knelt on the ground, his face full of fear. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader said, "Don't say I didn't give you a chance. I'll give you one more night. If you still haven't found that person's whereabouts by tomorrow morning, you can come back with your head." The steward's eyes were also burning with anger. He looked up at the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader and said, "Then you'd better kill me now." "How dare you?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader was furious. The steward said, "I'm not being presumptuous. I just don't want to do something meaningless." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader shouted, "He killed our tribesman, and I asked you to find him. You call that meaningless?" "That's right. I also want to find him and avenge our dead tribesman. But we don't know who he is, nor do we know his name. We don't even know where he came from. How do you expect me to find him?" The steward said, "Is that your excuse?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader's face was dark. The steward shook his head and said, "I'm not looking for an excuse. I'm just stating the truth." "How dare you talk back to me?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader suddenly stood up and landed in front of the steward. He grabbed the steward's neck and twisted it. He said with a sinister smile, "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? It's my honor to die in the leader's hands. But before I die, I'd like to give you a piece of advice. This advice is something I've always wanted to say, but didn't dare to say. Don't be so domineering and spoiling young Master Audiobook, or our Heavenly Spiral Tribe will be destroyed by you sooner or later." The butler said expressionlessly, "How dare you curse our tribe? You're courting death." The leader of the Heavenly Spiral Tribe gritted his teeth as killing intent shot out from his eyes. Where is the leader of the Heavenly Spiral Tribe? However, just as the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader's killing intent surged, a cold voice rang out above the tribe. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader raised his eyebrows and looked at the steward. "Count yourself lucky. I'll let you off today. Go reflect on your mistakes." After saying that, he threw the housekeeper to the ground as if he was throwing trash. Then he rushed out of the main hall and shouted, "Who dares to trespass into my Heavenly Spiral Tribe? Do you want to die? This small tribe is really arrogant." That cold voice sounded again. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing in the sky above the tribe. His aura was as vast as the ocean, unfathomable. His pupils immediately shrank. He flew up into the sky and landed in front of the middle-aged man. He frowned and said, "Who are you? Why did you barge into my Heavenly Spiral Tribe for no reason?" The middle-aged man said, "Who I am is not important. What's important is that you have offended someone you shouldn't have." "Then do you know the consequences of offending me?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader laughed arrogantly. The middle-aged man was stunned and asked curiously, "Tell me about it?" "Then you better stand properly. I'm afraid you'll piss your pants. Listen carefully. My daughter is a disciple of the main tower and has a good relationship with the direct disciple of the main tower master. If you dare to provoke me, you're digging your own grave." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader shouted. The middle-aged man was stunned and said playfully, "Why didn't I know that Ancestor Mu has a good relationship with your daughter?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader said disdainfully, "Who do you think you are? Are you qualified to know about the matters in the main tower? Do you have the ability to know?" "Ha ha!" The middle-aged man laughed loudly. At this moment, the steward walked out. When he saw the middle-aged man, his expression changed slightly. He quickly flew to the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader and whispered, "Leader, this person's aura is unfathomable. Be careful." "Be careful of what?" "I still don't believe that he's from the main tower." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader snorted. In his opinion, it was impossible for someone from the main tower to personally come to a small tribe like theirs. But before he finished speaking, the middle-aged man stopped laughing. He looked down at the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader and said, "Sorry, I'm really from the main tower." As he spoke, he took out a golden token from his bosom. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader was stunned. The steward looked at the golden token and was also dumbstruck. The middle-aged man joked, "Do you know what this is?" "Divine envoy token." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader swallowed his saliva in fear. How was this possible? This person was not only from the main tower, but also the divine envoy. Why did the main tower's divine envoy come to their Heavenly Spiral Tribe? The commotion here had already alarmed the people in the city below. The streets were full of people, but without exception, their faces were filled with horror, including Chu Xian's mother. Plop! After the steward came back to his senses, he immediately knelt in front of the middle-aged man and said, "Sir, our leader had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please have mercy." Yes. This lowly one was blind. This lowly one deserves to die. Please have mercy, sir." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader shuddered and quickly knelt down and begged. The middle-aged man said, "Then answer me now. Do I have the qualifications and ability to know what's going on in the main tower?" Yes. The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader nodded repeatedly, his eyes full of horror. The middle-aged man put away the divine envoy token and sneered, "I heard from young master how that your Heavenly Spiral Tribe is arrogant. At first, I didn't believe it. How arrogant can a small tribe be? But I didn't expect it to be true." "Young master, how?" The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader's eyes trembled. Who didn't know young master How? Could it be that the person this person was talking about was young master How? That's right. You've angered young master How. You have 3 days to leave the Central Divine Kingdom. The middle-aged man said. "Where to?" the Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader asked. The middle-aged man said, "Back then, Qin Feiyang killed everyone in the first district. It's been reduced to ruins. You can go to the first district to reclaim it." The Heavenly Spiral Tribe's leader's face turned pale. He nodded and said, Okay. This lowly one will bring the steward to the first district tomorrow." No matter how unwilling he was, he dared not disobey the main tower's order. Did you misunderstand what I meant? I'm not talking about the two of you. I'm talking about the entire Heavenly Spiral Tribe. The middle-aged man said. What? Both of them trembled. The entire tribe had to go to the first district? Wasn't that the same as being expelled from the Central Divine Kingdom? Sir, the Central Divine Kingdom is our root. You can't force us to leave our homeland. This lowly one knows his mistake. Please let us go. Even if you want this lowly one to die, don't expel us from the Central Divine Kingdom. The two of them kept kowtowing and begging for mercy. The people in the city below were also in an uproar. They were panicking. The middle-aged man was not moved at all. He said indifferently, "It's useless to beg me because this is young Master Hao's order. Hurry up and get ready. I'll personally send you on your way in 3 days. Actually, this is a good thing for you because there's no one else in the first district. You can dominate as much as you want." The middle-aged man sneered, opened the portal, and left without looking back. The two of them watched the portal disappear and collapsed powerlessly. The steward said in despair, "Chief, did you see that? This is the consequence of your arrogance." "I know I was wrong." "Steward, can you think of a way? We can't go to the first district." The chief of the Heavenly Spiral Tribe looked helplessly at the steward. Although they were just a small tribe in the Central Divine Kingdom, they were already considered a super tribe compared to the tribes in the 9 regions. Moreover, the Central Divine Kingdom and the 9 regions were very different. If the people in the Central Divine Kingdom were compared to the nobles, then the people in the 9 regions were the commoners. The most important thing was, in the Central Divine Kingdom, It was not so troublesome for the tribe's disciples to enter the main tower as long as they were talented enough. But once they went to the first district, it was almost impossible to enter the main tower. This was equivalent to banishing them to the first district and letting them fend for themselves. Sigh. The steward looked at the chief of the Heavenly Spiral tribe and sighed. We can only look for the young miss now. Is it useful to look for her? Maybe even she has been expelled from the main tower. The chief of the Heavenly Spiral tribe said in despair. Of course it's useful. As long as she agrees to marry that Fatso, then with the relationship between Fatso and Ancestor Mu, we can definitely persuade him to help us. The steward said, Yes, why didn't I think of that? Ancestor Mu is the direct disciple of the main tower master. He and young master usually call each other brothers. As long as he is willing to help, we can definitely escape this disaster. The chief of the Heavenly Spiral tribe's eyes lit up. He immediately took out an image crystal and sent a message to Chu Xian. At the same time, Jian Feng, Fatso stood behind a bush and looked at Li Yan sitting on the edge of the cliff from afar. He muttered impatiently, How long is this woman going to stay here? Since she learned that she was going to marry Fu Anshan, Li Yan had been sitting on the edge of the cliff, motionless. No one knew what she was thinking. Boss, why don't you just tell her that he is not dead and everything will be fine? Why do you have to make things like this? Fatso shook his head helplessly. He glanced around and found a stone. Then he sat on the stone and looked at Li Yan in boredom. But not long after he sat down, Li Yan suddenly got up, looked at the dark night sky, and flew toward the mountain range ahead. Fatso was surprised and immediately got up to follow her. But at this moment, the image crystal in his arms moved. Who is it? Why is he causing trouble? Fatso raised his eyebrows and took out the image crystal. Buzz! A shadow appeared. It was Chu Xian. However, the vigor of the past had already disappeared, leaving behind only a face of anxiety. Obviously, she already knew about the tribe. A look of disgust flashed in Fatso's eyes. He chuckled and said, What wind is blowing today? You actually took the initiative to contact me? Chu Xian hesitated and said, Well, I have something too. I'm not free now. Let's talk about it another day. But before Chu Xian finished, Fatso directly turned off the image crystal and then pondered. What was going on? Had young master already started to take action? Forget it. Let's go and take a look. Don't do anything stupid. Chapter 1081. The night was as dark as ink. Fatso followed behind Li Yan and continued to rush into the depths of the mountain range. Where is she going? If they continued to go deeper, they would reach the sacred ground. There were rules in the main tower, and ordinary disciples were not allowed to enter the sacred ground. After an unknown period of time, suddenly, Li Yan stopped and looked down at the mountain stream below. Fatso looked down suspiciously and saw a pool of water below. It was about 100 feet deep and the water was clear, but it was dead silent. Li Yan's gaze was on the pool. Is she going to jump into the water and commit suicide? Fatso was surprised. Whoosh! Just as he had this thought, Li Yan suddenly swooped down and her target was the pool. Oh no! Fatso was shocked and hurriedly flew to stop her, but before he got close, he stopped again. He saw that Li Yan did not jump into the water to commit suicide, but landed by the pool and stared at the water. However, Fatso did not dare to let his guard down. After facing repeated blows, Li Yan must be feeling very uncomfortable now and might suddenly do something stupid. He quietly landed in the woods by the pool and hid in the dark, staring at Li Yan. Xiaobai, I'm here. Suddenly, Li Yan spoke softly to the pool, and a smile appeared on her face. Xiaobai. Fatso was slightly stunned and glanced at the water. Who was she talking to? Splash. Not long after she finished speaking, the water suddenly rippled. Whoosh! The next moment, a white stream of light rushed out of the water and landed in front of Li Yan. It was a small thing that looked like a snake and was only about the length of a chopstick. It was as white as jade and emitted a hazy glow in the night. No way! Looking at the little thing, Fatso was dumbfounded. On the little thing's head, he saw a white horn. It was like white jade, sparkling and translucent, and under its abdomen, Fatso also saw 4 claws. Her 2 black eyes were as bright as gems, and they were very attractive. This. It's actually Little White Dragon. Am I fucking seeing things? Fatso's face was filled with disbelief. He rubbed his eyes hard and looked at the little thing again. I'm not seeing things. It really is Little White Dragon. Fatso's gaze trembled, his eyes filled with shock. The divine dragon was something that only existed in legends, but he did not expect it to really exist in this world. Li Yan stretched out her slender arm and stroked the little white dragon's head. She smiled and said, "Little White, I haven't seen you for a few days. Did you miss me?" "Yai." The little white dragon cried out softly as it rubbed its little head against Li Yan's palm, seemingly enjoying Li Yan's touch. Unbelievable! This woman actually has a little white dragon by her side. Fatso mumbled, his eyes shining brightly. The divine dragon was the king of all beasts. Anyone who saw it would be moved. Li Yan held Little White Dragon in her hands like a mother. Her eyes were full of love as she asked, "Little White, it's been so long. Why can't you speak?" The gigolo looked at Li Yan innocently, shook his little head, and made a very helpless expression. What a cute little thing! Li Yan hugged Little White Dragon lovingly and sat on a green rock by the lake. She looked at the faintly discernible crescent moon in the dark clouds, and a worried expression appeared on her face again. How nice would it be if Grandpa Fatty was that little white dragon? Looking at the little white dragon rubbing against Li Yan's chest, Fatty's face was filled with jealousy and hatred. They were both living beings. But why was there such a huge difference? The night wind was a little chilly. Little White Dragon gradually noticed Li Yan's abnormality and raised its little head to look at her suspiciously. "Little White, do you know? So many things have happened during this period of time, and I can't hold on any longer," Li Yan murmured. Little White Dragon looked at her as if it understood. Li Yan retracted her gaze and looked at Little White Dragon's lively eyes with a smile. "You don't understand yet." Little White Dragon pouted to express its dissatisfaction. "Little thing, I'm in a good mood after seeing you, but this might be the last time I'll come to see you." Li Yan sighed, her expression filled with loneliness. Little White Dragon still had a confused look on its face. Next, Li Yan said a lot more to Little White Dragon. Time passed bit by bit. Soon, the horizon began to turn white, and the sun slowly rose. Li Yan looked at the morning sun. Her face withered like a flower, exuding a kind of sad beauty. Sigh. She let out a long sigh, picked up Little White Dragon, and laughed. "Little thing, I really can't bear to part with you. But in this world there is no banquet that doesn't end. You have to live well, because you're different from me. My fate has already been decided. But you, one day in the future, the world will worship you as a god. No one can restrain you, and no one dares to control your fate." After Li Yan finished speaking, she held Little White Dragon and extended it towards the pool, smiling. "Go!" "Yeah." Little White Dragon did not jump into the pool. It waved its claws, as if it was trying to express something. Li Yan said, "Are you saying that we will go to the outside world together in the future?" Little White Dragon nodded repeatedly. Li Yan's expression was slightly gloomy, but then she smiled and nodded. "All right, I'll wait for you." Little White Dragon cried out excitedly a few times, then intimately stuck out its tongue and licked Li Yan's palm. then turned around and jumped into the pool, disappearing. The surface of the water quickly calmed down. It's finally time to leave. That night, the most boring person was Fatso. He couldn't do anything and just kept squatting there. He was about to get sick from holding it in. However, he stood there, looking at Lian, only to see that Lian had not left. "What else do you want to do?" Fatso gradually frowned. Suddenly, Lian took out a dagger from her cosmos bag. Fatso's pupils shrank, and he immediately became alert. "Father, Mother, I'm sorry. I can't marry an old man, Grandfather. Yen-er is here to accompany you." Lian muttered to herself, held the dagger, and stabbed it towards her heart. "Damn it, I really did something stupid." Fatso's face changed. Like an ape, he jumped out and instantly landed in front of Lian, and then grabbed Lian's wrist. The dagger had already cut through Lian's clothes and almost pierced her heart. Fortunately, I made it in time. Otherwise, I would have been scolded to death by the boss. Fatso wiped his cold sweat, grabbed Lian's dagger, and said angrily, "Why are you so stupid? What's in it for you?" Fatso's sudden appearance surprised Lian. Fatso said helplessly, "I have been watching you in secret, afraid that you would do something stupid." Lian was stunned, then shook her head and said self-deprecatingly, "I didn't expect that there would be someone in this world who cares about me. You asked me what's in it for me, and I told you that I can be free by doing this." Fatso said, "Isn't it just some trivial matter? Do you need to be so pessimistic? My grandfather, who loved me the most, is dead. Father wants me to marry an old man. Is this still a small matter?" Lian stood up and stared at Fatso, angrily roaring, "What's the big deal? Who doesn't have any setbacks in their life? If everyone is like you, committing suicide when they encounter something, then wouldn't the world become extinct? Besides, your grandfather doesn't want to see you like this." Fatso said, "I know, I understand what you're saying, but when I think about living with Fu and Shan for the rest of my life, I can't help but be afraid." Lian squatted on the ground, hugging her legs in despair and pain. "Sigh." Fatso sighed and squatted beside her. He reached out and patted Lian's back, comforting her. "No, trust me, everything will be fine. I believe you. But tell me, what should I do? I don't want to marry him." Lian turned around and hugged Fatso like a helpless child, crying bitterly. With the beauty in his arms, Fatso was at a loss for a moment. He raised his hands and didn't know where to put them. In the end, he put his hands on Lian's shoulders and comforted her. "Don't cry, you're no longer a child. When you encounter difficulties, you have to face them bravely, not blindly running away." When Lian heard this, she pushed Fatso away and sneered, "Anyone can say these words. You won't understand my current mood." "I don't understand." Fatso was also angry. He stood up and pointed at Lian's nose and scolded together, saying, "Do you think you're miserable? But let me tell you, there are many people in the world who are more miserable than you. For example, I really like a woman, but in the end, she was just using me to get close to my boss. Do you know how painful it was for me when I learned the truth? But I understand that only by living can I have it, so I didn't seek death like you. I also hope that you can pull yourself together, because the surprise is often at the end." Fatso said meaningfully. Lian fell silent and stopped sobbing. After a long time, she looked up at Fatso and asked, "Who is that woman?" "Chu Xian," Fatso said. "Chu Xian?" Lian thought carefully for a moment and said, "I've heard of this woman. It seems that she and Guofeng." Fatso nodded and said, "Yes, it's the woman who hooked up with Guofeng before." Lian said, "I've heard of her, too. She doesn't seem to be as bad as you say. Why else would I say that she's a scheming woman? Let me tell you, she's too good at pretending. I used to follow her every day, but I didn't notice any flaws. In the end, it was Boss who found out." Fatso said in disgust, "Then you're really miserable. Li Yan looked at Fatso sympathetically, slowly got up and said with a smile, "Hearing about your experience, my mood is a lot better." Fatso's face darkened, and he said angrily, "We're friends after all. Can you not be so obvious about gloating?" Haha. Li Yan shook her head and said with a smile, "Instead of gloating, it's better to say that we're in the same boat. I was deceived and you were forced to marry. Can this be considered as being in the same boat? It's not at all, okay?" Fatso rolled his eyes at her. Buzz! Suddenly. Chapter 1082. Fatso took out the image crystal, his face full of disgust. That night, the image crystal rang at least a dozen times, but he did not respond once, because he knew that it must be Chu Xian who sent him a message. "What are you doing?" Li Yan looked at him suspiciously. "It should be a message from Chu Xian. I don't want to see her any more." After Fatso finished speaking, he put away the image crystal. Li Yan said suspiciously, "Since she is using you, why did she take the initiative to send you a message? What happened between you two?" Fatso's heart skipped a beat. If he told Li Yan about him, he might be able to distract her. He coughed dryly and asked, "Do you really want to know?" Li Yan pursed her lips and said, "If you want to tell me, I'll listen. If you don't want to, I won't force you." "So unique?" Fatso was stunned and shook his head with a wry smile. "It's like this," just as Fatso was telling Li Yan. On the other side of the martial artist mountain range, Chu Xian was walking back and forth in her cave abode, her face full of anxiety. "What's going on with this disgusting fat pig? I've sent him so many messages, but he didn't respond to me." She didn't realize that Fatso had seen through her conspiracy and still had an unapproachable attitude. "I don't believe that he can really ignore my existence." She took out the image crystal again and sent a message to Fatso. "Beside the pool." Fatso finished the whole story in a few words. After listening, Li Yan suddenly realized and said, "In that case, young master has already set out to deal with the Heavenly Jade tribe. Now Chu Xian is looking for you, not because she has changed her mind, but because she wants you to help her." "That's right." Fatso nodded. Li Yan shook her head and sighed. "This woman's scheming is indeed a little scary, but she's also caught in her own trap." Buzz! At this moment, Fatso's image crystal rang again. Fatso raised his eyebrows and said impatiently, "It must be her again. Don't worry, I'll go back with you." Li Yan nodded. Fatso also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, this problem was solved. He believed that Li Yan would not do anything stupid in the future. But after taking 2 steps, Li Yan stopped again. "Don't tell me you haven't thought it through?" Fatso's eyelids twitched as he looked at her nervously. Li Yan rolled her eyes and faintly sighed. "Don't worry, I won't take things too hard. I'm just thinking, should I anger that Chu Xian a little?" "How?" Fatso was suspicious. Li Yan pondered for a moment, and a sly look flashed in her eyes. She smiled and said, "You respond to her first." "All right." Fatso took out an image crystal and infused his battle aura into it. Wong. The next moment, Chu Xian's shadow appeared. When she saw Li Yan next to Fatso, she immediately raised her eyebrows, then looked at Fatso and said, "What's the matter with you?" "I've been sending you messages since last night, but you haven't replied to me?" Fatso was about to speak. Li Yan suddenly stepped forward and hugged Fatso's arm, looking extremely intimate. She looked at Chu Xian and said, "He was with me last night. Of course, he didn't have time to care about you." Fatso was stunned. This was too unexpected. He had thought of many possibilities, but he did not expect Li Yan to use such a method to anger Chu Xian. But it was quite interesting. At the same time, Chu Xian's face turned green. It was not easy for her to put down her face and take the initiative to look for this damn fat pig. But she did not expect that he had already hooked up with another woman. "Give me an explanation." Chu Xian's face was a little ferocious. Lord Fatty can be with whomever he likes. Why should I explain myself to you? Who are you? Fatso sneered. Chu Xian's body trembled, and she looked at Fatso as if looking at a stranger and said, "Did you lie to me before?" "I didn't lie to you. At that time, I really liked you, but suddenly I found a better woman than you." Fatso hugged Lian's slender waist and was extremely proud. "Don't go too far." Feeling Fatso's big hands, Lian secretly glared at him. Fatty snickered. "It's just acting." "Of course, we have to make it look good." Lian's face darkened, and she looked at Chu Xian with a forced smile and said, "Is there anything else? If not, please don't harass us again in the future." "What should I do?" Chu Xian panicked. If she did not deal with Fatso, how could she persuade Ancestor Mu to help her? "Do you have anything else?" Li Yan urged impatiently. Fatso looked down at Li Yan and said with a smile, "Sister Yan, why are you talking so much nonsense with an unrelated person? Ignore her, let's go on a date." With that, Fatso was ready to turn off the image crystal. "Wait." Chu Xian hurriedly reached out and looked at Fatso. "I like you too. Let's be together. You like me?" The fatty grinned and said, "I'm someone who doesn't have a good figure or strength. When did I become so popular?" Chu Xian said, "I don't care about that, as long as you treat me sincerely." "Still pretending?" Fatso sneered secretly and shook his head. "I'm sorry, you and I are in the past. Now, I only have Sister Yen in my heart. I only have you in my heart too." Li Yan was also very cooperative and looked at Fatso affectionately. Looking at the two of them who were full of affection, Chu Xian was furious and shouted hysterically, "You heartless bastard, I misjudged you!" She was starting to play the bitter game. "I'm heartless? Tell me honestly, during this period of time, when have I not been like a mangy dog around you all day? But what about you? Have you ever looked at me in the eye? That's right. You're beautiful and have a good temperament. You're unattainable. I'm a fat man with a big head and big ears. I'm not worthy of you. You feel embarrassed to be with me. Since that's the case, why did you come to me?" Fatso sneered. Chu Xian's face was green and red. Fatty's words were like loud and clear slaps, mercilessly slapping her face. Not only did it hurt her self-esteem, but it also trampled on her until she was scarred. But now, she could only endure. She looked at Fatso in disappointment and said, "Can't you see? I was testing you, but I didn't expect you to be so weak." "Test?" Fatso sneered and said, "What about your parents? They came here in person to test me too?" This woman was really shameless to the extreme. Why didn't he realize it before? "Yes, we are all testing you. Let's cut the crap. I'll ask you one last time. Do you really want to be with her? Do you think she's really with you because she likes you?" Chu Xian sneered. Fatso hugged Li Yan in his arms and said playfully, "Then why do you think Sister Yen is with Fat Lord?" Chu Xian sneered and said, "I don't dare to talk nonsense, but it should have something to do with Ancestor Mu." The meaning behind his words was obvious. He was saying that Li Yan was using the fatty. A thief calling a thief? Fatso was stunned. Li Yan was also angry. It was Chu Xian who was using Fatso to get close to Ancestor Mu. But now she was biting her back. Did she really think she was easy to bully? Li Yan looked at Chu Xian mockingly and said lightly, "I'm not like some people who are two-faced and only care about profits. The man I want doesn't need to be strong, handsome, or have a strong family background. As long as we get along well, it's fine. Maybe in your eyes, Fatso is useless, but in my eyes he is my treasure and no one can replace him. Fatso, am I right?" After Li Yan finished speaking, she looked at Fatso and asked, "Yes, yes, yes." Fatso nodded repeatedly. Although he knew that it was just an act, he couldn't help but straighten his back and be in high spirits when he heard Li Yan's words. "You adulterous couple, Just wait and see. Chu Xian's eyes were ferocious. This was the first time in her life that she had been humiliated like this. Not only did she hate Fatso, but she also hated Li Yan. Let me tell you, you can scold me, but don't scold Sister Yen. If I hear you scold her again, don't blame me for being ruthless. Fatso's eyes were cold and flickering. Good, very good. Damn Fatso, remember this. You humiliated me today, and I won't let it go just like that. Chu Xian was about to go crazy. She spat out a few words before her shadow disappeared. Haha, Fatso suddenly laughed. Li Yan was also smiling, but when she found that Fatso hadn't let go, her face darkened and she said, How long are you going to hold on to me? Fatso was stunned and quickly withdrew his arm. He smiled embarrassedly and said, Sorry, I was too immersed in the act. Li Yan stared at him speechlessly and asked, Are you happy now? Yes. The resentment that has been accumulating for a few days is finally gone. I can start a new life. Thank you. Fatso looked at Li Yan gratefully. Li Yan said, It's okay. Just treat it as returning the favor of saving my life. Fatso rubbed his head and laughed foolishly. Li Yan rolled her eyes at him, and her expression became lonely again. She sighed and said, Sai, your matter has been solved, but what about mine? I really don't know how to solve it. Fatso smiled and said, Don't worry, that old thing Fu and Shan won't succeed. You want to help me? Li Yan looked at him in surprise. It's a secret. You'll know when the time comes. In short, that old fart wants to eat a cabbage like you. He's daydreaming. Fatso smiled disdainfully. Hearing this, Li Yan's heart inexplicably felt at ease. Fatso said, Let's go. Fat Lord will send you back. Li Yan nodded. Then the two of them walked side by side towards the warrior mountain range. I have a question to ask you. Haven't you already broken through to the Battle Saint realm? Why don't you go to the sacred land? Li Yan's voice sounded in the forest. Fatso had already stepped into the Battle Saint realm. Fatso said, It's to stay by Chu Xian's side. Then you entered the main tower for her? Li Yan asked again. Yes. Fatso sighed deeply. Then you're really stupid. Li Yan despised him. How would I know that she's such a person? Fatso said helplessly. Chapter 1083. Time flew by. There was only one day left before the Heavenly Spiral tribe would be expelled. This morning, Chu Xian came to Soothing Lake and stood by the lake. Looking at the small island in the middle of the lake, she gritted her teeth and flew towards the small island. Roar! However, just as she flew up, a huge beast roared out of the lake. Chu Xian was so scared that her face turned pale, because it was a sacred beast. The beast stood above the lake like a beast god. It looked at Chu Xian coldly and shouted, The main tower is a forbidden area. Please leave immediately. Chu Xian quickly said, I am a friend of Ancestor Mu. I have something to discuss with him. Please make an exception. The beast said, Since you are a friend of Ancestor Mu, why don't you send him a message directly? Chu Xian said, I haven't had the time to establish a contract with him. How can you be considered a friend without establishing a contract? Do you think I am one of those beasts that have yet to develop intelligence? Get lost immediately. The beast shouted, its huge eyes flashing fiercely. Chu Xian said anxiously, We are really friends. If you don't believe me, you can ask him. The beast looked at her suspiciously and asked, What is your name? Chu Xian. Chu Xian said, All right, wait here. I'll go and ask him. After saying that, the beast flew towards the small island. Thank you. Chu Xian quickly bowed and thanked it. Then, she glanced at Soothing Lake with envy. This place is great. Not only does it have an independent courtyard, but it also has a sacred beast guarding it. If I could live here, why would I need to curry favor with that fat pig? Why is the heavens so unfair? I have worked so hard for so long, but I am still just an ordinary disciple. How many years has this ancestor Mu been in the main tower? He is already a disciple of the main tower master and is respected by the world. I am not convinced. Tightly, Chu Xian clenched her fists. The envy on her face turned into jealousy and hatred. Whoosh! After a while, the beast returned and looked at Chu Xian. Sorry, Ancestor Mu said that he has no time to see you now. This, Chu Xian's body stiffened. She hurriedly said, Did you tell him my name? Yes. He also specially asked me to tell you that he is powerless to do anything about the heavenly spiral tribe. The beast said. Chu Xian's eyes trembled, and her face was full of despair. The ferocious beast said, Please leave immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. No, I must see him. Please make an exception. Chu Xian pleaded bitterly, but the ferocious beast was not moved at all. It's useless even if you see him, but at this moment, a cold voice sounded. Young Master Hao and Wang Yu both flew over. Greetings, young Master Hao. Greetings, Miss Yu. Chu Xian hurriedly bowed. Wang Yu looked at her coldly and said, Put away your hypocritical face. Chu Xian was puzzled. Why do you say that, Miss Yu? Young Master Hao said, We all know what kind of person you are. There's no need to pretend anymore. Chu Xian's expression froze. Young Master Hao said indifferently, Do you know why I'm dealing with your heavenly spiral tribe? Chu Xian shook her head. Because you provoked Fatso. Provoking Fatso is provoking Ancestor Mu. Provoking Ancestor Mu is provoking me. Young Master Hao said, How did I provoke Fatso? Is it because I didn't agree to his pursuit? Chu Xian said angrily, If that's the case, I naturally won't target your heavenly spiral tribe. But you used Fatso to get close to Ancestor Mu. This is what I can't tolerate. Young Master Hao shouted, What? They really know. Chu Xian's face was pale. How did these people know? Are you wondering why we found out when you hid it so well? Let me give you a hint. We've been to White Cloud City and even met your arrogant brother, Chu Outyan. That's all I have to say. Take care of yourself. With that, young Master Hao turned around and left with Wang Yu. Been to White Cloud City. Could it be? Chu Xian's eyes trembled. She suddenly raised her head and stared at the backs of Wang Yu and young Master Hao. She shouted, Why are you doing this to me? I just want to get what I want. Is that wrong? What right do you have to treat me like this? You're stubborn. Only by working hard can you get what you want. You can't use others. Initially, I only wanted to expel the people from your tribe and you could continue to stay in the main tower. But it seems like there's no need for that now. Tomorrow you'll go to the first district with your tribe. Young Master Hao said without looking back. Boom! Hearing that, Chu Xian felt like she was struck by lightning. Her body and mind trembled and her mind rumbled. I'm wrong. Let me stay. Please, I beg you. She quickly knelt in the void and begged pitifully. However, young Master Hao and young Master Hao ignored her and disappeared from her sight. Why? I can't accept this. Chu Xian roared at the sky like a crazy demon. Leave now, the ferocious beast shouted. It's ferocious. Might was like a waterfall as it pounced towards Chu Xian. I don't need you to rush me. I'll leave. Chu Xian retracted her gaze and glared at the beast. Then, she looked at the small island in the middle of the lake. Her eyes were full of resentment. Sooner or later, I'll enter the central divine kingdom openly. At that time, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your lives. Just you wait. She smiled sinisterly, opened the portal, and walked in without looking back. What? You're only going to expel them from the central divine kingdom? At the same time, Fatso and Qin Feiyang were talking through transmission. The fatty's face was filled with displeasure. I just heard it from young Master Hao. He probably misunderstood us. We said we'll make the heavenly spiral tribe disappear, but we're actually going to exterminate them. He thought we were asking him to expel the heavenly spiral tribe from the central divine kingdom. Qin Feiyang said, on the same day, since young Master Hao had offered to help solve this problem, he didn't ask about it. He had been cultivating quietly. When the beast went to find him, young Master Hao came out after hearing the news. He casually asked young Master Hao and found out. Isn't this letting the tiger return to the mountain? Fatso raised his eyebrows. Letting the tiger return to the mountain? It shouldn't be. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Although the leader of the Heavenly Spiral tribe was a 9-star battle saint, they had all unlocked the gate of potential. It was only a matter of time before they surpassed the leader of the Heavenly Spiral tribe. As for Chu Xian, she was just a battle master. Even if she was given time, what could she do? I still think we're letting them off too easily. Why don't we go to the Heavenly Spiral tribe tonight? Fatso's eyes flashed with killing intent. No. Young Master Hao must have gotten the Chief Pagoda Master's approval. If we go and exterminate the Heavenly Spiral tribe now, I'm afraid the Chief Pagoda Master will be dissatisfied. After all, the Chief Pagoda Master already has the intention to get rid of me. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Fatso nodded and said that's true. If the Chief Pagoda Master uses this as a pretext to make a fuss and accuses us of killing the innocent, then the loss will outweigh the gain. Yes, now we can't let him seize the opportunity. As for the Heavenly Spiral tribe, if you really want to get rid of them, we can just go to the first district. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Anyway, Chu Xian has suffered enough for the past 2 days. Fatso sneered. That's right. Moreover, for the people of the Central Divine Kingdom, being exiled to the first district is more painful than being killed directly. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. She finally paid the price. Let's see if she still dares to do this in the future. Fatso's face was full of disgust. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, How's Lian? As you expected, she really went to seek death. But now she has been comforted by Fat Lord. By the way, there's one more thing. Fatso's eyes lit up. What is it? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Fatso said, There's a little white dragon hidden in the Chief Pagoda. What? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up, his eyes full of disbelief. Fat Lord saw it with his own eyes. That little white dragon seems to have been born not long ago and has not fully awakened its intelligence. Fatso said, Where is it? Qin Feiyang asked. Fatso said, In a pool not far from the sword tip. Why don't Fat Lord take you to have a look tonight? Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then I'll continue to keep an eye on Lian. I'll send you a message tonight. After Fatso finished speaking, the shadow dissipated. Qin Feiyang returned to his seat and couldn't calm down for a long time. There was actually a little white dragon in the Chief Pagoda. This was too shocking. He couldn't wait to go and take a look. But reason told him that he couldn't do this, because there were too many people during the day. If he was seen by someone, it would be bad. Midnight. 2 black shadows swept across the sky above the sword tip. It was Qin Feiyang and Fatso. Fatso chuckled and said, Boss, you didn't cultivate today, right? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. With the birth of the divine dragon, how could he still be in the mood to cultivate? It could be said that this day felt like a year to him. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and asked, Lian also knows about the little white dragon. Fatso said, She was the one who summoned the little white dragon, and it seems that they have a very good relationship. I didn't expect this woman to be so capable. Even the divine dragon likes her so much. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Fatso laughed. This means that she is kind-hearted. That's right. Generally, divine beasts like the little white dragon that have just been born prefer to come into contact with people with pure hearts. Qin Feiyang nodded. While they were talking, the two of them arrived above the pool. Go down. Fatso waved his hand, and the two of them landed by the pool like lightning. This place was still the same as last night. It was silent, and there was not the slightest fluctuation on the surface of the water. Little white dragon, I'm here. Fatso looked at the pool and called out softly in the same way that Li Yan summoned the little white dragon last night. Time passed breath by breath. Even after 100 breaths, there was still no movement on the surface of the water. Little white dragon, Big Brother has candy to eat. Little white dragon, Big Brother has a beautiful big sister here. Little white dragon, your sister Li Yan is looking for you. Fatso tried many more methods, but to no avail. He couldn't help but frown. What was going on? Qin Feiyang thought for a moment, glanced at the surface of the water, and said, It can't be that only Li Yan herself can call it out, right? This Fatso was unable to determine for a moment. Qin Feiyang said, Come, let's go down and look for it. Standing here and thinking, he couldn't come up with any results, so he might as well take action. Afraid of scaring the little white dragon away, when the two of them entered the pool, they were extremely careful and didn't make the slightest sound. The pool was not big, but it was very deep. The two of them carefully searched. Chapter 1084. After about 500 to 600 breaths, the two of them finally sank to the bottom of the lake. However, at the bottom of the lake, other than the dried leaves and mud that had accumulated for countless years, there was no trace of little white dragon. Fatso was secretly annoyed. Strange, it's clearly here. Why can't I find it? Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. Suddenly, with a wave of his hand, Wolf King, Winged Snow Eagle, Black Dragon Snake, Pangolin, Lu Hong, Viper, and Dan Wonkai appeared one after another. Qin Feiyang looked at everyone and said, You guys heard it from the castle, right? Hurry and help find it. All right. Everyone nodded and immediately took action. Time passed. Everyone searched for an entire hour and almost turned the entire lake upside down. But they still could not find Little White Dragon. Lu Hong said, Fatso, you're not playing with us, are you? Fatso smiled bitterly. Madam, how would I dare to play with you guys? Then why can't you find it? Lu Hong frowned. I'm wondering the same thing. Fatso, scan the bottom of the lake. What the hell? It was still here last night, but it was gone today. Where did it go? Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso and asked, Have you asked Li Yan about Little White Dragon? Can I ask such a thing? If I ask, she'll definitely suspect that I'm targeting Little White Dragon. Fatso said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and looked at Fatso. Go back and keep an eye on Li Yan first. I'll wait here and take a look. All right. Fatso nodded and headed towards the top of the lake. Qin Feiyang looked at Lu Hong and the others and smiled. I'll be enough here alone. You guys can go to the castle to cultivate as well. Dan Wonkai said hurriedly, Young master, can you help me solve the problem of the pill fire as soon as possible? He was a person who was born to refine pills. If he didn't refine pills for a day, his hands would itch. Qin Feiyang was stunned and apologized. I'm sorry, I forgot about it. After saying that, he took out a jade box and handed it to Dan Wonkai. He smiled and said, There's a cluster of grade 6 alchemy fire inside. Take it and use it. This grade 6 elixir fire was a congratulatory gift from the chief of the divine python tribe during the apprenticeship ceremony. Only a grade 6 alchemy fire? Dan Wonkai was a little disappointed. Then what rank do you want? 7th rank. Even the main tower regards the 7th grade pill fire as a treasure. Where am I supposed to find it for you? Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly. Dan Wonkai said, But if I use a 6th grade alchemy fire, I can only refine battle chi pills with 4 veins. This will slow down everyone's cultivation speed. The more veins there were, the more energy the battle chi pill contained. Although there was only a difference of 1 between 4 and 5 elixir veins, the difference in effect was like heaven and earth. That makes sense. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered for a while. He said, "How about this? You use it first. I'll go to the trading pavilion tomorrow." "All right." Dan Wankai nodded helplessly, then smiled and said, "What about the recipes for potential pills?" His eyes were filled with desire. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "It's all in the pill scripture. Go take a look yourself." "Thank you, young master." Dan Wankai was overjoyed. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Didn't I say it before? If you follow me, I won't mistreat you." Of course, of course." Dan Wankai nodded and smiled flatteringly. Beside him, Viper also had a flattering look on his face. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the people and beasts to the ancient castle. Then he sat cross-legged at the bottom of the lake and waited for Little White Dragon to appear. Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Although it was already late at night, it was still as lively as ever. In a certain private room, a woman in white sat beside the coffee table. The water in the teapot was already boiling and gurgling. The fragrance of tea filled the entire room. However, the woman in white did not seem to be interested in tea at all and was frowning the entire time. Buzz! Suddenly, she took out an image crystal. Before long, the image of a middle-aged man appeared. It was the leader of the divine Python tribe. The leader of the divine Python tribe smiled and asked, "Madam, how's the progress?" "That's right." The woman in white was the high priestess of the divine Python tribe. The high priestess sighed. "Don't mention it. I haven't even seen him yet." The leader of the divine Python tribe frowned and said, "What's going on? Didn't you go there long ago? Could it be that he doesn't want to see you?" "That's not it." The high priestess shook her head. "Then why is that?" The leader of the divine Python tribe was suspicious. The high priestess said, "Ever since I entered the divine city, I've been waiting at the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. But until now, he hasn't come to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion even once. I heard that this lad is a cultivation maniac and won't wander outside if there's nothing. Why don't you go to the main tower to look for him?" The leader of the divine Python tribe asked. "According to my sources, he's staying at the Soothing Lake now. You know that place. Outsiders can't enter at all. Moreover, if I go to the main tower to look for him openly, the tower master will definitely ask about it. The tower master is unfathomable. I don't want to face him unless I have no other choice." The high priestess said, "That's true." The leader of the divine Python tribe nodded and said, "What about Pei? Isn't he on good terms with Ancestor Mu? I don't want to alarm him either. After all, this matter is related to him." The high priestess rubbed her head and said, "Doesn't Ancestor Mu have many friends?" The leader of the divine Python tribe said angrily, "How can someone like him have friends?" "There's Fatso, but he hasn't come to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion either. As for Mr. Hao, he comes here often, but I don't dare to look for him." The high priestess said, "Why are you afraid of Mr. Hao? He's a good-for-nothing. Even if you reveal a flaw, he might not be able to detect anything. The next time you see him, go to him and ask him to pass on the message to Ancestor Mu." The leader of the divine Python tribe said with a hint of disdain towards Mr. Hao. The high priestess thought for a while and nodded with a smile. "You're right. I was too cautious. All right, I'll inform you as soon as I have news. Thank you for your hard work, madam." The leader of the divine Python tribe smiled. The high priestess smiled and turned off the image crystal. She went to her bedroom to rest. However, the two of them did not know that Mr. Hao, whom they had underestimated, had already been reborn and had found out about their secret. Before they knew it, the sky had turned bright. Qin Feiyang came out of the pool with a disappointed look on his face. After waiting for an entire night, he still did not see the little white dragon. If not for the fact that Fatso saw it with his own eyes, he would have doubted the existence of the little white dragon. There's still a long way to go. Let's take it slow. Qin Feiyang sighed inwardly. He raised his head and looked at the morning sun on the horizon. Then he opened the portal and walked in. East City, Trading Pavilion. Qin Feiyang came here again. It's ancestor Mu. He's now the direct disciple of the chief tower master. He doesn't lack anything. Why is he still here? When people saw Qin Feiyang, they immediately retreated to the side, their faces full of awe. Mr. Mu, is there anything I can help you with? The staff members of the trading pavilion also rushed toward Qin Feiyang, and they didn't even bother to hide their fawning expressions. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You guys go to your own things. I'll walk around alone." The group of staff was disappointed. It was not easy for the chief tower master's disciple to come to the trading pavilion. Unfortunately, they did not have the chance to curry favor with him. Qin Feiyang strolled around the trading pavilion. Everything here had not changed. He was also very familiar with the faces of the staff. However, he was not used to the trading pavilion without Li He. There was a sense of strangeness. "Mr. Mu, what a rare guest." After a while, an old man in red rushed over and stopped in front of Qin Feiyang. His old face was full of smiles. "You are." Qin Feiyang looked at the old man in red suspiciously. The old man in red cupped his hands and said with a smile, "My name is Lu Yuan. I'm the temporary manager of the East City Trading Pavilion." Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. The temporary manager was the temporary manager of the trading pavilion in the East City. To be able to replace Li He, this person's ability should be good. It's just that he doesn't know what kind of person he is. Lu Yuan smiled and said, "Mr. Mu, if you don't mind, please take a seat in the VIP room." "Lead the way," Qin Feiyang said. And, seeing Qin Feiyang agree so readily, Lu Yuan couldn't get used to it for a while. "Am I not welcome?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Of course you're welcome." Lu Yuan quivered and hurriedly led the way in front. Not long after, the two entered a small room. He had been to this VIP room before. Before, it was simple and tidy. And now, although it was still tidy, there were a lot of jewelry and decorations. Obviously, it was arranged by Lu Yuan. Perhaps in Lu Yuan's view, these things could improve one's identity and status. But in Qin Feiyang's view, they were very tacky. "Please take a seat," Lu Yuan invited enthusiastically. Looking at those jeweled things, Qin Feiyang had already lost interest. He waved his hand and said, "Forget about sitting. Let's get to the point." Lu Yuan was stunned and nodded with a smile. Okay, please go ahead." Qin Feiyang said, "I need a cluster of alchemy fire." "That's no problem. We have some 3rd and 4th grade alchemy fires in the trading pavilion now." Lu Yuan said. Qin Feiyang said, "What I want is not 3rd or 4th grade alchemy fire, but 7th or 8th grade alchemy fire." This, Lu Yuan was stunned and hurriedly said, "Mr. Mu, you are an alchemist. You should know how precious 7th grade alchemy fire is. Even if we have it, we will auction it. We will not trade it privately, let alone 8th grade alchemy fire. We really don't have it. The price doesn't matter." Qin Feiyang said. Lu Yuan smiled apologetically. "It's not about the price. We really don't have it. Please forgive us, Mr. Mu." Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Do the trading pavilions in West City, South City, and North City have it?" Lu Yuan said, "I don't know about that. If you have time, you can go take a look yourself. If you don't, I'm willing to help you ask." "All right, go ahead and ask," Qin Feiyang said. "Please wait for a moment, Mr. Mu." After Lu Yuan finished speaking, he turned and left the VIP room. Qin Feiyang sat next to the tea table and frowned. If the trading pavilions did not have it, Where could he find alchemy fire? Should he look for the chief tower master? Time passed quietly. Lu Yuan finally returned and said apologetically, "Mr. Mu, I'm sorry. I've asked. They don't have 7th or 8th grade alchemy fires. They do have 6th grade alchemy fires, but I don't know if Mr. Mu." Qin Feiyang stood up and said, "Forget about the 6th grade alchemy fire. Since they don't have it, I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye. Take care, Mr. Mu." Chapter 1085. Qin Feiyang opened the portal and returned to the calm lake. Soon, he received a message from Yan Wei. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Yan Wei laughed. "You went to the trading pavilion just now, right? In fact, although there is no 8th grade pill fire in the trading pavilion, there is a cluster of 7th grade pill fire. It seems to have been obtained by the pavilion master some time ago." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and asked, "Then why did Lu Yuan say that he didn't have it?" "Because of Fu Anshan. Fu Anshan has already told Lu Yuan and the others that as long as you go to the trading pavilion, they will say that they don't have it. Of course, if it was in the past, Lu Yuan and the others would definitely not listen to him. But now the matter of Fu Anshan inheriting the position of deputy pavilion master has been decided, and they don't dare to go against Fu Anshan anymore. In other words, the stewards of the 4 major districts are suppressing you in disguise." Yan Wei said, "This old thing still doesn't know how to stop?" Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with anger. "Stop? You're thinking too much. He's still proud of himself." Yan Wei said playfully, "Then I'd like to see how long he can be proud of himself." The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted, pursed with a thick sense of ridicule, and then said, "Don't act rashly. I will take care of him." "I know." Yan Wei nodded. After ending the conversation, Qin Feiyang lowered his head for a moment and sneered, "If I let you live so comfortably until the succession ceremony 2 months later, it would be too easy for you." He walked out of the attic and arrived outside young Master Hao's door. "Dong!" A moment later, young Master Hao opened the door and smiled. "Are you planning to go to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion with me?" "Why would I go to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Young Master Hao said, "Don't you know? Today is the day of the Dragon Phoenix wine auction." "Not interested." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "Then why are you looking for me?" Young Master Hao was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, "I want to ask, where does the pavilion master live?" "You're looking for him?" Young Master Hao was surprised. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Young Master Hao's eyes brightened as he asked, "Why are you looking for him? Is there something interesting?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You can say that. How about it? Are you interested in going together?" This young Master Hao hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Forget it. I'll still go to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. That old man lives outside the city. If you go west with your speed, you'll see a huge valley in about an hour. He lives in that valley." "All right, then I'll go. I also wish you the best and see the true appearance of the young lady of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion." Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "True appearance." Young Master Hao shook his head and sighed. "It's good enough to see her." Qin Feiyang looked at him. Young Master Hao's perseverance in this aspect was quite good. If it were anyone else, they would have fallen out long ago if they didn't even know what she looked like after paying so much. I'm just saying if her true appearance isn't as beautiful as you think, or even an ugly monster, can you accept it? Qin Feiyang asked. That depends on how ugly she is. If it's just average, I can accept it. Young Master Hao said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, saying, Then I wish you good luck. After saying that, Qin Feiyang opened the teleportation gate and descended outside the city. Then he rushed straight to the west. An hour later, He indeed saw a valley. The valley was unimaginably large, covering an area of dozens of miles. It was surrounded by mountains on all sides and could only be entered from above. There were also countless ferocious beasts in the forest around the valley, and they were basically all emperor beasts. Even from afar, he could sense the terrifying auras coming from them. This old man really knows how to pick a place, Qin Feiyang muttered. Walking in this place was simply terrifying. Roar! A black leopard roared out. Its body was more than 10 meters long, and its emperor's might surged in the sky. Qin Feiyang's pupils constricted, and he immediately became vigilant. But the result was beyond his expectations. The ferocious beast did not attack him, but just observed him from afar. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Suddenly, the black leopard said, Young Master Mu, please follow me. What's going on? How do you know who I am? Qin Feiyang was extremely shocked. The black leopard did not answer. It turned around and flew toward the valley. Qin Feiyang followed it suspiciously. Gradually, he found that the emperor beasts lurking in the mountains were also looking at him curiously. After a while, Qin Feiyang followed the black leopard into the valley. He was immediately dumbfounded. In such a huge valley, medicinal herbs were all planted. Some were green and glistening. Some were crystal clear. They swayed in the wind, gushing with multicolored light, exuding endless vitality. Walking in the air above the valley, Qin Feiyang felt that his entire body was enveloped in a rich medicinal fragrance, making him feel refreshed. What kind of place is this? Following behind the black leopard, Qin Feiyang scanned the valley, his face full of surprise. Suddenly, he looked at a red fireglass tree. On the fiery red tree trunk, there was actually a tiger-shaped spirit pattern. He looked at a dragon's saliva fruit. On the fruit, there was also a tiger-shaped spirit pattern. Beside the dragon's saliva fruit, there was a 9 suns flower, which also had a tiger-shaped spirit pattern. This, Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. He raised his head and looked all the way into the depths of the valley. He found that many medicinal herbs had tiger-shaped spirit patterns. Why are there so many 10,000-year-old medicinal herbs? Only medicinal herbs over 10,000 years old would have tiger-shaped spirit patterns. These medicinal herbs all have owners. I advise you not to have any crooked thoughts. The black leopard suddenly turned to look at Qin Feiyang with an unfriendly look in its eyes. Items with owners? Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. The so-called owner couldn't be the pavilion master of the trading pavilion, right? In that case, wasn't this the medicinal field of the trading pavilion? A moment later, Qin Feiyang came to the center of the valley. There was a small wooden building in the middle. There were a total of 2 floors, and there were no decorations, looking extremely simple. In the medicinal field beside the small wooden building, there was a white-haired old man who was taking care of the medicinal herbs with his head lowered. It's really him, Qin Feiyang muttered. The old man was skinny and supported himself with a walking stick. Wearing an old white robe, he looked weak, but his aura was extremely terrifying. Black Robe landed in front of the old man and said respectfully, Master, Ancestor Mu is here. Master. Qin Feiyang's eyes widened. I got it. The old man chuckled, but did not raise his head and continued to take care of the medicinal herbs. The black leopard turned to look at Qin Feiyang before rising into the air and flying out of the valley. Qin Feiyang looked at the pavilion master of the trading pavilion and did not know what to do for a moment. Therefore, he stood at the side and looked at him silently. A moment later, the pavilion master of the trading pavilion was finally done with his work. He stood up with his walking stick and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. Young friend, we meet again. Greetings, senior. I hope you don't take offense at my sudden visit. Qin Feiyang cupped his fists. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion waved it off. You're too polite. It's my honor to be a guest here." When he saw how polite the old man was, Qin Feiyang felt a little embarrassed and asked, "Senior, how did the black leopard know who I was?" The pavilion master of the trading pavilion said, "It's not just the black leopard. The emperor beasts outside the valley know as well." The more Qin Feiyang listened, the more confused he became. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion smiled again. "I told them that if you came here one day, they would bring you indirectly." "I see." Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion said, "Young friend, you didn't come from afar just to visit an old man like me, right?" Qin Feiyang said, "I'm sure there's a private matter that I want to discuss with you." "Then let's talk inside." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion led Qin Feiyang into the small wooden building. In front of the wooden building, there was a small open space with some flowers and plants. There was also a round stone table and 2 stone stools. "I never thought that as the pavilion master of the trading pavilion, Senior, you would live such a simple life." Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. "I'm already so old. What else can I do? Now, I just want to have some peace and quiet." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion smiled and pointed to the stone stools. "Young friend, please take a seat." Qin Feiyang nodded and sat on the stone stools. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion asked with a smile while making tea, "Young friend, your trip to Qinghai was quite smooth, right?" Qin Feiyang said, "Thank you for your concern, Senior. It was quite smooth." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion said, "Young friend, have you seen someone called Tanjing?" "Who is Tanjing?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Tanjing died in his hands. Of course, he knew who it was, but he certainly could not admit it now. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion smiled and said, "I heard from the chief pavilion master that the alchemy fire was snatched away by your big brother in the end. Tanjing should have died in his hands too." "I don't know about that. Why don't I help you ask when I have time?" Qin Feiyang said, "That's not necessary. People have to pay a price for what they want. Young friend, please have some tea." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion smiled faintly and pushed a teacup in front of Qin Feiyang. "Senior, you are detached from worldly affairs. I admire you." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands, then picked up the teacup and tasted it. Immediately, his eyes lit up and he praised, "Not bad. There is a faint fragrance of medicinal herbs in the natural tea fragrance. It has a unique flavor. Young friend, please look over there." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion pointed to the medicine field on the left. Qin Feiyang looked over and saw a small green tree growing in the medicine field. That was not a medicinal herb. It was a tea tree. "Those are the tea trees that I cultivated myself when I had nothing to do. Although they are all ordinary tea trees, under the influence of the medicinal fragrance all year round, each leaf has a natural medicinal fragrance. I'm not bragging, but it tastes better than the so-called good tea outside. If you like it, I can give you some later." The pavilion master of the trading pavilion said with a smile, "Thank you very much." Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. It seems that young friend is also a tea lover. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion smiled and retracted his gaze. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Young friend, what are you here for this time?" Chapter 1086. The master of the trading pavilion looked down at the Juka Yellow Dragon elixir suspiciously. Immediately, he looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise and said, "Isn't this the Juka Yellow Dragon elixir?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. The master of the trading pavilion said suspiciously, "Why did you take out this elixir? Did you think that the auction price was too high? Do you want to return it now?" "Return it?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. What did that mean? "Young friend, We have a rule in the trading pavilion. Once something is sold, it can't be returned. Of course. I can also buy this Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir, but the price, the master of the trading pavilion said with a smile. Wait. Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand and interrupted the master of the trading pavilion. He said with a strange expression, Senior, you don't think that I bought it from the auction in the trading market before, do you? The master of the trading pavilion was stunned and asked, Isn't it? Only the trading pavilion has auctioned the Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir before. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. This old man was really cute. Senior, it's true that only the trading pavilion has auctioned the Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir before. But I want to ask you, who got this Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir from? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. I don't know. The only one who knows is Li He, but he's dead now. The master of the trading pavilion sighed. It was his biggest regret that he couldn't find the person who refined the Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir. Qin Feiyang was helpless. He had made it so obvious, but the old man still couldn't see through it. This old man was too slow. He didn't talk nonsense and took out another Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir. Young friend, you actually bid for so much back then. The master of the trading pavilion didn't understand Qin Feiyang's meaning and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Qin Feiyang's face darkened and took out another elixir. Tisk, TSK, young friend, you're really rich. The master of the trading pavilion exclaimed. You haven't comprehended it yet. Qin Feiyang was speechless. However, he also knew that it was not the pavilion master's fault. It was just that the 9 tunes yellow dragon pill was too miraculous and heaven-defying. It was normal for the old man to think that he had obtained it through bidding. Without another word, he took out another 29 chew yellow dragon pills. In addition to the previous 3, there were a total of 23. What? So many? The transaction pavilion's pavilion master abruptly stood up and stared at the 23 9-melody yellow dragon pills on the table, dumbfounded. Suddenly, he recalled that he had never auctioned off so many Juka yellow dragon pills before. Could it be? He suddenly raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang, saying in surprise, Could it be that you were the one who gave Li He's 9 chew yellow dragon pill? That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Where did you get it? The transaction pavilion's pavilion master shuddered and asked hurriedly. He had not thought that it was refined by Qin Feiyang. He only thought that someone gave it to Qin Feiyang, or that Qin Feiyang found it by chance somewhere. Ugh. Qin Feiyang was speechless once more. Young friend, I really want to know who refined the 9 chew yellow dragon pill. If you're willing to tell me the truth, I'll definitely repay you with a generous gift. The transaction pavilion's pavilion master looked at Qin Feiyang pleadingly. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, Senior, why don't you think about it? I'm the one who refined the 9 chew yellow dragon pill. You refined it? The transaction pavilion's pavilion master was stunned and shook his head with a smile. I have to admit that you're extremely talented in cultivation. However, I'm not looking down on you, but you definitely can't refine the 9 chew yellow dragon pill. Why? Qin Feiyang asked curiously. Because even I haven't seen the 9 chew yellow dragon pill before, let alone you. The transaction pavilion's pavilion master said. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, I'm sorry, but I was really the one who refined the 9 chew yellow dragon pill. Don't joke around. The transaction pavilion's pavilion master said with a smile. I'm not joking. Qin Feiyang said. The transaction pavilion's pavilion master frowned and looked at the 23 chew yellow dragon pills again. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, You really refined them? It seems that it's difficult to convince the old senior. Qin Feiyang simply took out the netherworld demonic flame and the fire wand cauldron. The transaction pavilion's pavilion master was surprised. Qin Feiyang got up and said, Senior, please turn around and wait for me to refine the spirit liquid before turning back. He did this because he did not want the old man to know about the medicinal herbs of the 9-chew yellow dragon pill. The transaction pavilion master glanced at him and quickly turned around. He also couldn't wait to know if the 9-chew yellow dragon pill was refined by the kid in front of him. Qin Feiyang took out a set of medicinal herbs and directly opened the furnace to refine pills. In less than 50 breaths, the spirit liquid of various medicinal herbs was refined. Qin Feiyang said, "You can look at it now." After refining the spirit liquid, the medicinal herbs would turn into ashes, and the transaction pavilion master would not know what medicinal herbs it was. Heard. The transaction pavilion master hurriedly turned around and walked in front of Qin Feiyang, looking down at the spirit liquid in the pill furnace. So much? At that moment, his gaze trembled slightly. There were at least 50 to 60 drops of spirit liquid in the fire lawn cauldron. In other words, the 9-chew yellow dragon pill required at least 50 to 60 kinds of medicinal herbs. Then he watched Qin Feiyang fuse the spirit liquid, step by step. Qin Feiyang's proficient alchemy technique and his calm demeanor gave him a fright again. Crash! All of a sudden, the pill furnace shone brightly and a strong pill fragrance wafted over, invigorating one. Swoosh! Immediately after, a stream of light swept out of the pill furnace. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and caught it in his palm. The transaction pavilion master stared at Qin Feiyang's hand. He was nervous. He was looking forward to it. "Senior, watch carefully." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and extended his hand in front of the transaction pavilion master, opening his palm slowly. The transaction pavilion master's pupils constricted bit by bit. Finally, when the elixir in Qin Feiyang's palm appeared before his eyes, his pupils constricted and his face was filled with shock. It was really the 9-chew yellow dragon pill, and there were 7 pill patterns. Was this a dream? The 7 pill patterns shone brightly and almost blinded his eyes. He swallowed his saliva. There was a rumble in his head. He didn't know how to express the shock in his heart at this moment. This man's martial arts talent was already beyond the reach of countless monsters in the central divine kingdom. But he didn't expect that his alchemy talent was also so terrifying. Was he still human? For a long time, the transaction pavilion master couldn't come back to his senses and was shocked. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and put away all the Juku yellow dragon pills, as well as the pill furnace and pill fire. He asked with a smile, "Senior, do you believe me now?" The transaction pavilion master shuddered and hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang. He cupped his hands and said, "Young friend, I didn't recognize you before. Please forgive me." "It's understandable." Qin Feiyang smiled. The transaction pavilion master shook his head and sighed. Everyone thought that the person who refined the Juku yellow dragon pills must be an extremely powerful and mysterious expert. Who would have thought that it was actually you? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Young friend, please take a seat." The transaction pavilion master's attitude was even more polite than the chief tower master's. Qin Feiyang sat back on the stone bench and picked up the teacup. He didn't speak anymore and drank the tea silently. He had achieved the effect he wanted. Now, he only needed to wait for the transaction pavilion master to speak. The transaction pavilion master was also a shrewd old man. Naturally, he could see Qin Feiyang's motive. He said, "Young friend, just say it. How can we continue to supply the Juku yellow dragon pills to the transaction pavilion? Since Li He's death, there were no more Juku yellow dragon pills. The transaction pavilion's popularity was declining day by day. So no matter what, he had to persuade Qin Feiyang to put the Juku yellow dragon pills up for auction in the transaction pavilion." Qin Feiyang put down the teacup and smiled. "Not long ago, I went to the Eastern City Transaction Pavilion to buy a cluster of 7th grade pill fire." The Transaction Pavilion master was stunned and asked, Lu Yuan didn't sell it to you? Qin Feiyang said, It's not that he didn't sell it, it's that he didn't have it. The transaction pavilion master said, suspiciously, That's not right. I just happened to get a cluster of 7th grade pill fire some time ago. How could I not have it? Qin Feiyang said, Not only did Lu Yuan say that he didn't have it, but even the people of the Western City, Southern City, and Northern City also said that they didn't have it. Why is that? Could it have been auctioned off? But that's not right. If it was really auctioned off, they would report it to me as soon as possible. The transaction pavilion master frowned. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, Whether it was auctioned off or not, I don't know, but I received a rumor that Fu Anshan and the other 3 stewards are secretly banning me. What? Did they eat a leopard's guts? The transaction pavilion master was furious. Senior, I'm very grateful to you for giving me the fire lawn cauldron, but this matter makes me very uncomfortable. Qin Feiyang said. The transaction pavilion master's heart skipped a beat, and he said solemnly, Little friend, don't worry. I'll definitely investigate this matter. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a smile and said, Then I'll wait and see. However, don't cancel Fu Anshan's position as the deputy pavilion master. Ask him to come to me. In addition, please keep the matter of the Juku Yellow Dragon pill a secret for the time being. I understand. The transaction pavilion master nodded. Qin Feiyang then got up and cupped his hands. Then I still have something to do, so I won't disturb you. Okay. The transaction pavilion master nodded and got up to send him off. Then, as if he thought of something, he stretched out his hand and said, Little friend, please wait. Qin Feiyang looked at him suspiciously. The transaction pavilion master took out 3 exquisite jade boxes from his Qingkuan bag. The jade boxes were the size of an adult's palm. These are the tea leaves that I made myself. Please accept them. The pavilion master of the trading pavilion handed the 3 jade boxes to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, Thank you, senior. I won't stand on ceremony. He really liked this kind of tea leaves. After putting away the 3 jade boxes, Qin Feiyang opened the portal and left. When the portal disappeared, the transaction pavilion master's face sank and he took out an image crystal. Buzz! Fu Anshan's figure appeared and bowed. Greetings, pavilion master! The transaction pavilion master said in a deep voice, Call Lu Yuan and the other 2 and come to me immediately. What's wrong, sir? Fu Anshan was surprised. Cut the crap. If it's not 10 breaths, all of you can scram. The transaction pavilion master shouted. Fu Anshan's eyes trembled, and he quickly said, Sir, please calm down. I'll call them now. After saying that, the illusory figure dissipated. What a bastard! The transaction pavilion master was about to go crazy. Chapter 1087. In less than 7 breaths, Fu Anshan and the other 3 appeared in front of the trading pavilion master and bowed respectfully. Apart from Fu Anshan and Lu Yuan, the other 2 were a red-haired old man and a stooped old woman in black. The old woman in black said suspiciously, Pavilion master, why did you call us here in such a hurry? Did something big happen? You still have the face to ask me? The trading pavilion master was furious. The old woman in black's face froze. Why did it sound like she had made a big mistake? But she didn't remember what she had done wrong. The trading pavilion master glanced at the 4 of them and said in a deep voice, Let me ask you, are you banning Ancestor Mu? The 4 of them were shocked. How did the pavilion master know? Could it be that someone told him? Fu Anshan hurriedly said, Sir, your words scared us. How could we have the guts to ban the chief tower master's disciple? How dare you deceive me? Ancestor Mu came to find me personally and said that he would go to the trading pavilion to buy a cluster of 7th-grade pillfire. But Lu Yuan, how did you tell him? The trading pavilion master said in a deep voice. The 4 of them were shocked. They never thought that Qin Feiyang would actually come to find the pavilion master for such a small matter. Lu Yuan, I'm very disappointed in you. You're only temporarily managing the East City Trading Pavilion, and you dare to deceive me. If you really become the manager of the East City Trading Pavilion, won't you be able to cover the sky with one hand? The Trading Pavilion master shouted. Lu Yuan's face turned pale, and he hurriedly knelt on the ground and said, Sir, I know my mistake. I won't dare to do it again. The Trading Pavilion master said, There's nothing to say. You've reached the end of your temporary management. Don't. Pavilion master, this was all ordered by Fu Anshan. Lu Yuan hurriedly mentioned Fu Anshan. Fu Anshan's expression changed, and he shouted, Lu Yuan, don't slander me. Shut up. When was it your turn to speak? The Trading Pavilion master raised his eyebrows and shouted. Fu Anshan's body trembled, and he did not dare to speak any more. The pavilion master looked at Lu Yuan and said in a low voice, Continue. Fu Anshan secretly transmitted his voice. Lu Yuan, if you dare to spout nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite to you. You're welcome. It's because I listened to your slanderous words that I ended up like this. You still have the nerve to threaten me? Lu Yuan looked at Fu Anshan with hatred. Then he looked at the pavilion master and said, Mr. Fu Anshan told me to kill Ancestor Mu. He even threatened me that if I didn't do as he said, he would kick me out after he became the vice pavilion master. The pavilion master glanced at Fu Anshan. Fu Anshan also quivered and knelt on the ground, exclaiming, Master, he is spouting nonsense. Please judge clearly. As he spoke, he gave a subtle glance to the black-clothed old woman and the red-haired old man. The 2 of them looked at each other and were about to speak up to help Fu Anshan. But at this moment, Lu Yuan took out the image crystal and looked at the pavilion master. My lord, this lowly one's image crystal contains the words Fu Anshan used to threaten me. You bastard, you actually dare to do this. Fu Anshan immediately looked at Lu Yuan gloomily. Lu Yuan secretly sneered, Dealing with an old fox like you, of course I have to be careful. Pavilion Master, it was indeed Fu Anshan who forced us to kill Ancestor Mu. Back then, Ancestor Mu caused the death of his son, Fu Xiong, in Qinghai City, so he held a grudge against him. My lord, we are helpless as well. Please show mercy. Hearing that Lu Yuan had actually recorded Fu Anshan's threat, the black-clothed old woman and the red-haired old man immediately changed their words. Because this was a good opportunity to take down Fu Anshan. As long as Fu Anshan fell, they would have the chance to succeed the position of Vice Pavilion Master. The Pavilion Master's face darkened as he shouted, Fu Anshan, what else do you have to say? Fu Anshan was terrified to the extreme and begged, My lord, this lowly one was wrong. This lowly one will never dare to do it again. Please give this lowly one another chance. After doing such a thing, you still want this old man to give you a chance? The Pavilion Master was furious and said, This old man let you succeed the position of Vice Pavilion Master to let you manage the Transaction Pavilion well, not to let you use your position to take revenge. If you don't even have this bit of awareness, do you still deserve to be the Vice Pavilion Master of the Transaction Pavilion? I think it's better to choose someone else. Fu Anshan laid weakly on the ground, his face filled with despair. Lu Yuan and the other 2 were secretly delighted in their hearts. The Pavilion Master of the Transaction Pavilion snorted coldly and was about to announce that Fu Anshan was disqualified from succeeding the position of Vice Pavilion Master. But suddenly, he frowned again. He thought of what Qin Feiyang said before he left. Don't remove Fu Anshan. What did he mean by that? What did Qin Feiyang want? Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and a trace of understanding appeared on his old face. He looked at Fu Anshan and said, "All right, this old man will give you another chance." "Thank you, my lord." Fu Anshan immediately became spirited again and shed tears of gratitude. Lu Yuan and the other two looked at each other and couldn't help but be secretly annoyed. The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion said, "Immediately go find Ancestor Mu and beg for his forgiveness. If you can't do it, then you can forget about the position of vice pavilion master forever." This, Fu Anshan was dumbfounded. Lu Yuan and the other two secretly laughed again. One had to know. Qin Feiyang and Fu Anshan had long been at odds. How could Qin Feiyang forgive him? Therefore, in their opinion, the pavilion master was deliberately pushing Fu Anshan onto the path of no return. In other words, Fu Anshan was destined to fail in succeeding the position of vice pavilion master. "What's wrong? You can't do it?" The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion said with a dark face. "I can do it." Fu Anshan hurriedly nodded. He could only brace himself and agree. "Then hurry up and go. And the three of you, pay attention to this old man in the future. If something like this happens again, this old man will not let you off easily. Scram!" The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion shouted. Yes. The four of them nodded and hurriedly stood up to open the teleportation gate and left. Just as the four of them left, a white-haired old man in black clothes walked out from the small wooden building behind them. This person was old and clumsy. Both of his hands were holding onto crutches. When he walked, he was trembling. There was not the slightest bit of aura around his body, as if he was about to die. After the black-clothed old man appeared, he looked at the pavilion master of the transaction pavilion and laughed hoarsely. "Lord is wise! Why did you come out?" The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion hurriedly turned around and walked forward to support the black-clothed old man. There was a trace of blame in his eyes. "Anyway, we're all about to die. Instead of sitting in the house every day, we might as well come out and take a good look at the scenery outside." The black-clothed old man laughed. This person was the vice pavilion master of the transaction pavilion. "Don't give up on yourself, okay? Listen to me. Hurry up and deal with the mundane matters on hand, then seal yourself. When I step into the false god realm in the future, I might be able to find a way to help you extend your life." The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion advised. "We'll talk about it later." The black-clothed old man smiled faintly and said, "I was quite worried just now. You directly announced that Fu Anshan would be disqualified as the vice pavilion master. You can see that too?" The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion asked. "Yes. Ancestor Mu's ambition doesn't lie here. He wants to torture Fu Anshan. This little guy's methods are a little scary. I can imagine how difficult Fu Anshan's life will be in the future. However, if Fu Anshan can really get his forgiveness, it means that Fu Anshan does have some means. It's not impossible for him to continue to take over this old man's position." The black-clothed old man laughed. The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion nodded and said, "Fu Anshan is still capable, but he's too arrogant." "That's right. When Ancestor Mu first came to the Divine City, the first person he looked for was him. Unfortunately, he didn't seize the opportunity and let Li He take advantage of it. As for Li He, to be honest, this old man didn't think highly of him in the past. But after some investigation, I found out that this person had always been diligent and never liked to be arrogant. He was also very kind to others. In terms of ability, he was not inferior to Fu Anshan and the others. It's a pity that he died an unnatural death." The black-clothed old man sighed, his old face full of regret. "In short, the two of us are still too tacky. We like others to flatter us in front of us. And this Li He is not that kind of person. His presence is extremely low." The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion smiled bitterly. "Yes, If it weren't for Ancestor Mu's appearance, I'm afraid we would never have noticed him. So we have to change this. The black-clothed old man said, "Let's not talk about it. I'll accompany you for a walk." The pavilion master of the transaction pavilion smiled. "Okay." The black-clothed old man nodded. "Lu Yuan, that damn bastard, he actually betrayed me." North City, the transaction pavilion. Fu Anshan sat in front of his desk and flew into a rage. Yan Wei stood at the side and laughed gloatingly. Then he said, "Sir, this is a little strange." "What's strange?" Fu Anshan turned to look at him suspiciously. Yan Wei said, "Although Ancestor Mu went to look for the pavilion master, he didn't know that we were banning him." "That's right." Fu Anshan was stunned and said in surprise, "Are you saying that someone is leaking information behind the scenes?" "It's very possible." Yan Wei nodded. He was trying to distance himself from the matter, because other than Fu Anshan and the other three, he was the only one who knew about this. When Fu Anshan calmed down, he might start to suspect him. But now, after hearing what he said, Fu Anshan would naturally ignore him and suspect Lu Yuan and the other two. Fu Anshan asked, "Then who do you think is the most likely?" "I think that all three of them are possible, because they are all coveting the position of Deputy Pavilion Master," Yan Wei said calmly. "Sigh." Fu Anshan sighed deeply and said regretfully, "I'm really smart for a lifetime but stupid for a moment. I clearly know that the three of them are hiding something in their hearts, but I still instigated them to deal with Ancestor Mu at this time. Isn't this giving them a chance?" "Sir, it's too late to regret it now. The most important thing right now is to think of a way to get Ancestor Mu's forgiveness as soon as possible, because there's not much time left until the succession ceremony. As long as we deal with Ancestor Mu, there's still a chance. Otherwise, I'm afraid that everything you've done will be for naught." Yan Wei said anxiously, "I know, but I really don't know how to deal with him." Fu Anshan rubbed his head, feeling weak both physically and mentally. Yan Wei said, "At this time, sir, you don't have to care about your face anymore. Lower your posture and beg him. As long as you show your sincerity, I believe that he will definitely forgive you." Fu Anshan's old face was unsettled. "Shua." Suddenly, he stood up and nodded. "All right, I'll go beg him now. After I succeed to the position of Deputy Pavilion Master, I'll make him repay me 100 times over." With that, he opened the teleportation gate and walked in without looking back. "Still thinking about the position of Deputy Pavilion Master? You're thinking too much." After the teleportation gate dissipated, Yan Wei shook his head and ridiculed, his face full of disdain. "You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.